Good morning, and welcome to this public meeting of the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission. We have one item on our agenda this morning, and that is our annual public hearing on the Commission's agenda and priorities for the next 2 fiscal years. Throughout the course of my last 4 years, I've said often that our mission is aided by the input and the insight from all of our stakeholders. And I'm grateful today to those of you who've chosen to present and those who have submitted written testimony to the agency as well for taking your time, your effort, and your resources to share your thoughts and your experience with our agency. Your input is truly invaluable to our agency. And I would pause a moment and say to all of you and those of who are watching us on the webcast that we do have this is our annual priorities hearing, but I would say to all of you, if you have an issue or a problem or a solution to something or a concern, that you would know that the door of the CPSC is always open, and you don't need to wait till this occasion to come here and express yourselves. I know I speak for myself as well as my fellow colleagues, the commissioners, and all of our agency, that our door is always open, and we hope you will share your good ideas or your concerns with us. This morning, the presenters have been divided into 2 panels. Each presenter will have 10 minutes to deliver their opening comments. Our secretary, Alberta Mills, will keep track of the time for us. Thank you to Ms. Mills and Ms. Hammond and all of the Office of the Secretary for their assistance today. I would just ask the presenters that you watch the lights in front of yourselves to track your remaining time. The yellow light indicates you have 1 minute remaining. After the presentations by all of the panel members, the commissioners will have 5 minutes each for questions. If the commissioners have additional questions, we'll just continue after that first round is complete. Out of respect for our panelists, I just want to make sure that we make an effort to stay on time so that everyone can meet the deadlines that they may have to meet. We will keep the record open, so all of you know, for 1 week after today's hearing. So if you did not get a chance to say something that you wanted to say and you feel is important, please know that you can come back and comment on that. And this is not your only opportunity to share those thoughts. You are welcome to supplement whatever testimony you have provided or further in writing until the next week. We are happy to receive that, and of course we will consider it as part of the record. So with that, I'll begin with our first panel this morning. Our first panel includes Nancy Coles from Kids in Danger. Welcome, Nancy. Mr. Chuck Samuels from the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers. Good morning. Dr. Diana Zuckerman from the National Center for Health Research. Good morning. Mr. William Wallace from the Consumers Union. Good morning. And Dr. Ben Hoffman from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I understand, Dr. Hoffman, I think you get the award for traveling the farthest, all the way from Oregon. So with that, Mrs. Coles, would you begin?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. Every year it's a wonderful opportunity for us to come and talk about what's important, what we see parents talking about, and the issues that we hope you'll focus on this year. As you know, Kids in Danger is dedicated to protecting children by fighting for product safety. Following are my thoughts on the priorities. You can read all of my recommendations in the written comments that I submitted. Through the implementation of the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act and the part we call Danny's Law, the CPSC has put much time and energy into developing mandatory standards for durable infant and toddler products. Staff has been thorough and determined to develop strong standards that address all known hazards. We urge CPSC to continue to prioritize this work, giving staff the time and resources they need to develop these strong standards that reduce injuries and deaths from nursery products. We were dismayed to see that 5 of these products fell off the list heading for final rules or proposed rules and were delegated back to data analysis and review in the mid-year review. We hope it doesn't indicate a slowing interest in the standard development process under Section 104 and is merely an acknowledgement that the work is lagging behind the goals set by the law. While CPSC has worked with the ASTM subcommittees on developing Section 104 rules, nothing in the regulation requires CPSC to delay enacting protections while they wait for the ASTM to act. Particularly disheartening is the delay in the high chair rule. 11,000 children under 5 are rushed to emergency rooms every year from injuries related to high chairs. This standard should be given highest priority, not moved again to the back of the line. And while CPSC took action to add crib bumper pads to Section 104 rules and begin rulemaking, we would prefer to see a ban of padded crib bumper pads. The AAP has a strong recommendation against using these products. They are unnecessary and unsafe. The amount of time and money that will go into designing a specific test method for suffocation risk from these unnecessary products would be better spent joining Maryland, Ohio, the City of Chicago, and most state child care regulators in the country and ban crib bumper pads. We would ask that if a mandatory standard is developed instead of the ban, that it be written in such a way that it prohibit the padded bumpers. And even with mesh liners, as more and more enter the market, if they are allowed under the standard, it should include specific performance requirements that assure their safety. I'd also like to address the list of products that is included in Section 104. The list was originally created in 2001 and updated in 2008 when CPSC began work on CPSIA. Other products have been added later as incidents pointed to the need for a safety standard. Just as standards evolve as new designs introduce new potential hazards, the group of products covered by Danny's Law should evolve as new products enter the market. Parents should have confidence that all durable infant and toddler products, not just those that were commonplace at the time the law was adopted, are safe. Danny's Law also requires companies to provide product registration cards and a way to register online. We were dismayed to learn recently that at least one major brand has violated that rule by sending a consumer 8 marketing emails in the 2 months after she registered. Because of Section 6B, we don't know how often this happens or if you take any action. The benefit of direct notification is so important to effective recalls. Violations must be taken seriously. Consumers are already biased to believe that companies play fast and loose with their personal information. This confirmation of a company doing just that with this legally protected information will confirm that bias and have a direct negative impact on product registration numbers. Speaking of those numbers, it would be very helpful to see public information on the numbers of products being registered, the percent of product owners in a recall who can be notified directly, and if those response rates are higher than general public notification rates. I'm going to skip over saferproducts.gov. No, I think it's very important. The development of saferproducts.gov was in part a compromise on transparency. We were looking instead for repeal of Section 6B of the Consumer Product Safety Act. Simply put, it's a gag order, restricting your ability to warn the public about product hazards and keeping consumers in the dark about products that they have in their homes and use with their families every day. Parents should not have to wait until a full recall effort is complete before learning their child is sleeping in a deadly crib, playing with a lead-tainted toy, or riding in a stroller prone to losing a wheel. Specifically, we urge the CPSC to avoid allowing companies to hide information incorrectly behind Section 6B. In some recent FOIA reports, companies have used it to hide information that's already contained in the recall press release, numbers of responses to recalls, and other information that is not, we believe, protected by 6B. CPSC should look for ways to weaken Section 6B's impact on public information and safety, and perhaps join us in calling on Congress to consider repeal. We were very pleased to see the recent vote to publish the monthly corrective action reports. We only hope they don't look like the ones we get, full of mistakes or with every bit of useful information redacted. Among children's product safety issues, a safe sleep environment is an overriding concern to kids in danger. Suffocation, most of it in a sleeping environment, is the leading cause of unintentional death in infants. The number of sleep-related deaths is too high, it's a public health crisis, and it has to be addressed. These products that are made for sleep are intended to be safe for sleep for a child, even without an adult in direct supervision. We've seen on the market cushions that prop up babies, specific products like the Nap Nanny or their copycat products, or products intended to help babies share an adult bed, such as the DockATot. They enter the market with little or no testing. CPSC should continue their work to develop standards for all sleep products and make it a priority within the Small Business Ombudsman's Office to provide outreach and vital product safety information to companies making these products. A quick Google search will provide plenty of examples. In 2016, last year, we worked with Shane's Foundation to do our first product testing on furniture. We worked with technicians at a UL lab in Holland, Michigan, and conducted performance tests on a sample of 19 dressers and chests. Only 9 of the 19 units passed the performance tests that are currently in the voluntary standard, and only 2 of the units passed all the tests we developed. Interestingly, we have seen only 4 of the units from 2 manufacturers recalled, leaving at least 6 units that we found failed the voluntary standard still being sold and in homes. KID recommends CPSC continue to work to support Anchor It, to reach parents with the need for anchoring furniture, encourage innovation in design of furniture and tip restraints, and work together with stakeholders on a stronger standard. Pacifiers, an integral part of baby care, a soothing product beneficial to infants and one that goes directly into their mouth. It's on our radar because we are continually contacted by parents whose pacifiers either fall apart or present other hazards. A quick look at saferproducts.gov report shows incident and injury reports that raise questions as to whether a review of your pacifier safety standard is required. With continuing reports and recalls, we would ask that you begin to look at that standard and make sure it addresses the hazards that we're seeing in the marketplace. We spent a lot of time yesterday talking about recall effectiveness. I want to thank Chairman Burkle and CPSC staff for that opportunity, and won't go into the comments we made there as they were fully expressed yesterday. But decreasing the likelihood that another family will suffer as Danny's family did from a recalled product still in the marketplace is one of our top priorities, and we hope it is for the CPSC too. Again, thank you for the opportunity to provide comments. We look forward to working with you in addressing these concerns and others that may arise.
Thank you very much. Mr. Samuels?
Thank you. Acting Chairman Burkle, and I hope that title is shortened very soon, and Commissioners, the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers appreciates the opportunity to testify before you today, and I'm Chuck Samuels, as General Counsel. First, I want to congratulate you, but really more particularly the staff, for running an excellent workshop yesterday. I thought it was very productive. I learned a lot, and I hope that there's a lot of follow-up on it that will be very beneficial. And I also hope that you'll conduct similar events like this in the future on other subjects. I want to talk to you about 4 matters that affect your budget and your plan and supplement our written comments. The first is alternative refrigerants. As you know, the United States and the globe is transitioning from greenhouse gases to alternative refrigerants, many of which are flammable to some degree. We have decades of experience in refrigeration and air conditioning in using these refrigerants, but it's obviously critical that it be evaluated, in particular for safety in the United States, really in North America. And we appreciate that Commissioner Kay supported the staff's involvement in standards efforts at UL with respect to refrigerators that culminated recently in a very beneficial change to the safety standard that allows some of these refrigerants to be used, but in a way that ensures continued safety to American consumers. But this is only the beginning, not the end. There are hosts of other refrigeration and air conditioning products that are looking at the same transition. And although obviously we had an election and we have a new administration that has a considerably different view on climate issues, the general trend to minimizing the use of greenhouse gases is going to continue in the United States and globally. Therefore, we need continued staff participation in standards activities for some of these other products, in our case, room air conditioners, dehumidifiers, and portable air conditioners. And I hope that you'll continue to support this. Neither we nor you can have surprises in the future. We need to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and have a comfort level by the regulators, by industry, by the standards organizations, and all stakeholders. And so it's important that we get this right from the beginning, and that it's all right, and it's very transparent about what is occurring. I would say in that regard, one thing, and this is true for other activities as well, is that it's important that you coordinate with other federal agencies. So, for example, in this particular issue, the policies of the Department of Energy and EPA are critical. Since obviously your activities don't go through OMB, you may miss out sometimes on some of these potential coordinating and integration roles. It's our job as the regulated industry to make you aware of them, and I hope that you'll be open to them. The second thing I want to talk about is counterfeit refrigerator water filters. The United States is being deluged with counterfeit refrigerator water filters, many of which, probably most of which, are sold on the internet. These products brazenly use the brands of legitimate manufacturers and claim compliance with structural and safety standards that are completely false. The consequence of this is not only do many of these products not perform the functions that they claim that they're going to do, but even worse, many of them actually add contaminants to the drinking water, such as arsenic. We've talked to you about this individually, and we are intensifying our effort in this area. We ask for your support, we ask for your involvement with customs, and even your involvement internationally. This would be an issue to take up with your counterpart Chinese regulator, because that's where these products are coming from. So thank you for your interest so far, but let's continue to work together on both education and compliance efforts. And we're continuing research, and of course we'll keep you fully apprised of that situation. Third, I want to talk about the old Refrigerator Safety Act and ask that you work with us and others on a cooperative effort to see if it's possible to reduce, maybe get rid entirely of the administrative burden on a legal requirement that has no impact on safety and simply costs manufacturers money. We're required to get involved in the GCC system because of this act, but substantively, the Refrigerator Safety Act, which hasn't been updated for way over 50 years, has nothing to do with modern refrigerators and has been completely supplanted by the UL standard. In fact, the latch mechanisms that law talks about, which were a significant hazard in the 1950s and early 60s, have not and could not be used for many, many decades. But on the other hand, the UL standard does keep up with modern technology. We would like you to consider whether there be some way to change the regulatory requirements consistent with the law, exercise some enforcement discretion, as you did, for example, on wearing apparel, and ultimately agree with us to support a change in the law so that we can make some regulatory reform. And then you'll have one maybe you can give to other agencies in the executive branch under the 2-for-1 executive order that doesn't apply to you, and you'll be like a hero. But this would be very, very helpful to our industry. I think this is a great opportunity now to take a look at it. I hope you'll work with us on it. Finally, I want to make a more general point about joint or cooperative research between industry and the CPSC. In the last few years, we've had the opportunity very productively to work with the staff in areas in which we were doing research and the staff was doing research. I would say the highlight of that is probably on cooking fires, in which we did some parallel and ultimately coordinated studies that ended up in a significant changes to the safety standards that's going to, over time, reduce many fires and many injuries. But we still have a problem of a lack of transparency, frankly, and where we're surprised or not knowledgeable about research work that's going on within the commission, and there's no benefit to that. It would be much better if we fully understood the relevant research agenda, explained to you, as we have been, what we're doing, and then see where we can work together. We're not talking about you funding us. We're not looking for that. But there are MOUs and cooperative research agreements and even much more informal arrangements that would be much more efficient use of all of our resources and prevent surprises that don't benefit anyone. So I hope, although that's not really a specific item, that culturally we can work towards that change over time. That's all I have, and obviously I'd be glad to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Dr. Zuckerman?
I'm Dr. Diana Zuckerman. I'm president of the National Center for Health Research, which is a nonprofit organization that's staffed by scientists and medical professionals and public health professionals. But I also want to say we provide a lot of information to families across the country on health and safety issues. I'm not going to stay too close to my written remarks today. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and say how much we greatly respect the work of the Consumer Product Safety Commission, as well as the challenges you face in setting priorities for so many things that need to be priorities. And as a scientist, I'm going to focus on some scientific issues today, but I share the concerns of many consumer speakers that you're going to hear from today. So I'm going to focus on phthalates and other endocrine-disrupting chemicals, particularly those in products that are widely used by children and also that pregnant women get exposed to. And in addition to toys and other frequently used products, I'm going to focus on playgrounds, athletic fields, and even sidewalks made with tire crumb rubber and other artificial turf, including what's called poured-in-place surfaces. As you know, the Consumer Product Safety Commission has been a champion for children with its careful analysis of phthalates in toys and also products for children under 3 years of age. And particularly the products specifically for children under 3 are not the only ones that pose risks to our families. We also need to be concerned about phthalates in many products. So we think of hard surfaces like this as being hard, but actually there's always dust coming up. This is a very clean room, but there's dust coming up at all times. We're breathing that in. We're touching it. If we're a child, we're then putting it in our mouths. So we have to be concerned about this dust migrating into our environment and our homes and our bodies. As you probably know, phthalate metabolites are detectable in just about every person in this room and in this country. And many of them are endocrine disruptors, which means they disrupt our hormones. And that can have long-term effects on our health and on our children's development and even on our children's ability to learn. So our center provided a lot of scientific information to Capitol Hill, and in that way we were instrumental in shaping the law that resulted in permanent and temporary bans on 6 phthalates in children's toys and child care articles. Those bans need to be expanded. Over 2 years ago, this agency proposed a rule following the Chronic Hazard Advisory Panel, CHAP. And this rule is absolutely essential for providing additional protections for our children. So we support the permanent bans on 4 additional phthalates and making permanent the interim ban on DINP. The CHAP report also recommended an interim ban on DIOP, which should also be included in the rule. We strongly disagree with the proposal to lift the interim ban on DNOP and DIDP, and while they may not affect male hormones, they are associated with organ toxicity, believe me, not a good thing, and altered development of all types. So the CHAP report also recommended additional studies on 3 other phthalates and 6 phthalate alternatives, and the final rule should include a timeline for the completion of those studies that reflects how damaging those phthalates can be. We also urge you to expand your work to include products that can cause prenatal exposures, as well as those that can harm older children and other vulnerable adults. Phthalate exposure has been found to increase the risk of early puberty, which is a big problem in this country. Many children starting puberty at the age of 9 and 10, a time when they still don't even know how to make change for $1, and they're having to deal with hormones affecting their thoughts and feelings. And this is especially important. A study just came out the last few days, a meta-analysis of over 100 studies showing that sperm count is less than half of what it was just a generation ago. So we know that these chemicals can affect sperm count, and they're affecting fertility in this country. These exposures also affect pregnant and breastfeeding women and their children, and through that it can affect brain development and the reproductive system. Phthalates in household dust can be very dangerous regardless of what products it comes from. Artificial turf made with recycled tire crumb rubber and other products has similar risks because it's widely used. It can release chemicals that affect the health of our children of all ages. It can affect pregnant women, and it can affect athletes and other adults. Artificial turf is currently used on more than 12,000 athletic fields and many, many playgrounds in this area, for those of you who live here, as well as all across the country. And most parents are completely unaware of these risks. The scientific evidence suggests that crumb rubber, as well as poured-in-place rubber and other artificial turf, have safety hazards when they're used on playgrounds and playing fields. The rubber from recycled tires, but even those from what are called virgin tires or virgin rubber, is not comprised only of rubber from a rubber plant. Instead, it includes lots of chemicals. It includes phthalates, PAH, VOCs, heavy metals, and other chemicals that are known or suspected to be harmful. And in addition to disrupting chemicals, they can increase a person's chances of developing cancer. While just a one-time or sporadic exposure might not matter very much, many of these fields are used by children every single day. And if not every day, then at least every week for years. And it's being used during a critical time when they're very vulnerable to exposure. Artificial turf made with crumb rubber and poured rubber products can also cause short-term harm. For example, crumb rubber has been found to generate dust, which can exacerbate asthma in children. And the products heat up. They're much hotter than the air is, so that they can even cause burns. In addition, they seem softer, but they can actually be so hard that they're more likely to cause concussions and other injuries. So while we can conclude that good old-fashioned grass is actually pretty safe, we can't conclude that about these surfaces, which are everywhere. And let me say, a lot of them are very, very pretty. They're beautiful colors. They look very child-friendly. They're very dangerous. And as often the case when researchers are paid by those with conflicts of interest, some studies are saying that these products are safe. However, the studies that are more reassuring don't comprehensively evaluate the health risks from these products. For example, many of the studies of air quality are looking at stationary measures. They're not looking at what happens when kids are jumping up and down on them and playing on them. And so you have to look at what happens during activity, not just when it's sitting there and nobody's doing anything with them. You can't just expose half of our children to these playgrounds and the other half not and see what happens. You can't do a study like that. It wouldn't be possible and it wouldn't be ethical because we know that there are carcinogens in these products. So it's going to be very hard to study them, but the studies that have been done so far really concern us a lot. We're encouraged that this agency is working with other federal agencies to investigate the safety of crumb rubber on playgrounds and playing fields. and we strongly urge you to broaden that, your investigation to include other synthetic rubber products and to provide warnings to families and athletes as soon as possible, because the public has very limited access to information about that. They don't even know whether to be concerned. And all Americans are really relying on you, on this agency, to protect us and to protect our children. So, in summary, we just want to strongly urge you to consider these views, to expand the scope of your concern about phthalates to these other very widely used products that children are, in some cases, using every day and that parents have no control over it. They can't decide what to buy. These playgrounds are everywhere. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zuckerman. Mr. Wallace.
Good morning. On behalf of Consumers Union, the policy and mobilization arm of Consumer Reports, an independent nonprofit, thank you for the opportunity to testify. Throughout CRCU's history, identifying marketplace hazards and improving product safety has always been a core part of our mission. Today, we have highlighted several topics that we hope the CPSC will emphasize in fiscal years 2018 and 2019. We address additional topics in our written comments. First, we urge the CPSC to prioritize several substantial hazards that consumers encounter around their house, or apartment or home, or even in their pocket. These hazards can be hidden, they may be unknown or poorly understood. These include furniture and TV tip-overs, CO and smoke alarm, laundry detergent packets, window covering cords, and the safety of battery and electronic systems. Second, we urge the CPSC to prioritize several hazards associated with consumer products used outdoors, which represent a significant focus of ours at Consumer Reports. These include carbon monoxide, poisoning from portable generators, lacerations from pressure washers, amputations and other injuries from table saws, and pool safety. Third, hazards related to products designed for some of our most vulnerable, infants and toddlers, should remain a top CPSC priority. This includes ensuring safe sleep products and moving forward on both pending and future Section 104 standards under the CPSIA. Fourth, we urge the CPSC to take several steps on chronic hazards. Finally, the CPSC is a critical agency that is chronically under-resourced. Its overall budget, staffing levels, and communication and outreach efforts should all be increased. To start, we highlight the topic of furniture and TV tip-overs. We appreciate the agency's work to improve public awareness of the hazard from furniture and television tip-overs. However, with more than 30,000 emergency department treated injuries and nearly 500 fatalities every year associated with this hazard, the Commission should use every tool at its disposal to ensure known risks are eliminated. We have pressed for a stronger voluntary industry standard on clothing storage units, but we have not seen the kind of urgency and industry-wide accountability that consumers need. Carbon monoxide and smoke alarms. Deaths and injuries from home fires and unintentional carbon monoxide poisoning remain significant, and Consumer Reports stresses the importance of installing and maintaining smoke and CO alarms. In March 2017, we named 3 CO alarms purchased on Amazon and eBay as don't buy safety risk due to poor performance and no certification to the UL CO alarm standard. We reported our findings to the CPSC and to both retailers, which stopped selling the products. We look forward to continuing to work with the agency in this area. Liquid laundry packets. Recent investigative work by Consumer Reports examining CPSC data shows that liquid laundry detergent packets pose a significant safety problem, including for adults with dementia. With regard to young children, we are working closely with all stakeholders to ensure that there is adequate data to measure the voluntary standard's effectiveness. However, if that standard proves inadequate, the CPSC should consider an enforceable mandatory standard. Also, Consumer Reports recommends that households where children younger than 6 or cognitively impaired adults are ever present should avoid these products until there is a significant, a meaningful decline in injuries. Window covering cords. Efforts to address the risk of injury to young children from hazardous accessible window covering cords remain inadequate. We continue to urge the CPSC to develop a mandatory standard to eliminate the risk of strangulation. Battery and electronic system safety. In the second half of 2016 alone, the CPSC recalled more than 2.5 million units due to lithium-ion battery fire hazards, including Samsung Galaxy Note 7 smartphones that were not initially recalled in coordination with the agency. Given this troubling episode and other recent electrical system problems in products such as hoverboards, we urge the CPSC to continue its research on battery safety and keep pressure on manufacturers to build safe electrical systems that meet effective standards. Portable generators. With an average of about 70 deaths and several thousand non-fatal injuries annually, it is tragically clear that education and warning labels alone are not enough to protect consumers from the risks of portable generators. We agree with the Commission that performance requirements are needed. A comprehensive safety standard should include both prevention and detection-based approaches. We support the CPSC's proposed rule and also have urged the agency to consider a shut-off mechanism as a fail-safe. We are aware of recent developments regarding the voluntary standard being crafted by portable generator manufacturers and look forward to reviewing a proposed standard soon. Pressure washers. Our analysis of CPSC data on pressure washers, published in the March 2016 issue of Consumer Reports, showed that pressure washers sent an estimated 6,057 people to the emergency room in 2015 alone. Due to an extreme potential risk of laceration, we are no longer recommending pressure washers that come with nozzles that produce sprays of less than 15 degrees, and are asking manufacturers to stop including such tips and settings. The CPSC should consider making the same recommendation. Table saws. More than 30,000 blade-related table saw injuries occur annually, with an average of more than 10 amputations every day. We were pleased to see the Commission publish a notice of proposed rulemaking in May to address these injuries. A performance standard to limit the depth of a cut is a sensible, feasible approach and could yield aggregate net benefits of billions. We urge the CPSC to finalize the mandatory safety standard for table saws. Pool safety. More than 4,100 children younger than age 5 suffer submersion injuries and require emergency room treatment every year. About half are seriously injured and admitted to the hospital for further treatment. Pool safety should remain a CPSC priority as injuries and deaths remain high. Safe sleep. The presence of dangerous padded crib bumpers on store shelves is misleading to consumers, and the products should not be for sale. We support ongoing work at ASTM and at the state and local level to ensure that unsuspecting parents or caregivers do not put their children at risk. Aftermarket mattresses for certain cribs, playpens, and play yards also pose a risk to infants, and their sale is inconsistent with the warning label required by the voluntary standard ASTM F40615. We were pleased to see the majority of commissioners vote recently to direct CPSC staff to initiate a related rulemaking under CPSIA Section 104. Recently, baby boxes have increased in popularity here in the United States. These products do not meet any relevant safety standards, and Consumer Reports has reminded parents and caregivers that the safest place for a baby to sleep is a crib meeting CPSC standards. We encourage CPSC support for standards development activities to ensure these products are safe. Pending and future Section 104 standards. We strongly support and applaud the agency's ongoing efforts under CPSC Section 104. The agency should pursue strong final rules, including those addressing hazards associated with booster seats, infant inclined sleep products, and baby changing products. We also look forward to reviewing proposed rules in the near future regarding several other product types. Given their demonstrated record of success, we urge the Commission in the next 2 years to keep its Section 104 activities a top priority. Chronic hazards. The agency should finalize its phthalates rule without additional delay. It should address, under the FHSA, hazards presented by non-polymeric additive organohalogen flame retardants in children's products and other product categories. We also offer our support for your in-house and interagency work as we undertake our own efforts to decipher trends and data, trends from data on chronic hazards. CPSC's capabilities. The agency should receive additional funding and staff to implement programs to prevent consumer harm and respond to safety problems, including through import and marketplace surveillance. In addition, we continue to strongly support saferproducts.gov, and the agency should continue its efforts to make the database as up-to-date, consumer-friendly, and frequently used as possible, both by those who submit complaints and the agency in follow-up investigations. On the public communication side, It is critical for the CPSC to be a vocal advocate for consumer safety, the way it has been in the past, such as on issues like the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 recalls and the IKEA recalls for furniture that could too easily tip onto young children. The CPSC should continue to play its critical role in informing the public about potential hazards as quickly and as prominently as possible. In conclusion, we greatly appreciate the CPSC's efforts to address hazards associated with consumer products and applaud the Commission for its leadership and achievements over the last year. We look forward to continuing to work with the agency and all stakeholders to save lives and fulfill the CPSC's mission in 2018 and 2019.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wallace. Dr. Hoffman.
Good morning, Chairman Burkle and members of the Commission. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Dr. Ben Hoffman. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm a pediatrician, and I currently serve as the chair of the AAP's Council on Injury, Violence, and Poison Prevention Executive Committee. I'm a professor of pediatrics at the Oregon Health Science University in Portland, Oregon, and medical director of the Tom Sargent Safety Center there. The AAP appreciates the opportunity to make recommendations to the CPSC on its agenda and priorities for the upcoming fiscal years. Unintentional injuries remain the #1 cause of death for children 1 to 19 and the 5th leading cause of death for newborns and infants under the age of 1. Pediatricians, parents, and caregivers trust that the products that they provide for their children are safe because CPSC monitors hazards to proactively prevent harm to children. You may have noticed that many of our recommendations to the Commission are similar to the ones we made last year. We feel that the CPSC's work is far from done and needs to move more quickly. Rather than reduce regulations, we believe that the CPSC has the capacity to do more as the regulatory agency entrusted with making the products with which children sleep, live, grow, play, and thrive as safe as possible. I will walk through some of the areas that the AAP believes the CPSC should prioritize in the coming years in order to protect children's health and safety. My complete testimony has been submitted in writing. Safe sleep messaging. The AAP deeply appreciates the CPSC's ongoing work to promote safe sleep, but much work remains to reduce the high incidence of sudden unexplained infant death, or SUID. While much progress was made on SUID early in government efforts, we've seen very little progress in reducing SUID in a decade or more, and in some high-risk groups, the rates are going in the wrong direction. We call on the CPSC to use its position to promote improved understanding of how to best promote safe sleep among high-risk families and to reduce the hazard posed by certain infant sleep products. The Commission should continue its work in promoting safe sleep behaviors and removing unsafe sleep products from the marketplace. We continue to see new unregulated sleep products on the market every month, and we remain very deeply concerned that parents are placing their infants in these products believing that they are safe. In fact, for most of them, there is no standard and no testing done to make sure they will not suffocate a child. The role of the CPSC is key in keeping such products off the market, and I'm happy to have a follow-up discussion with the Commission about specific unregulated sleep products of concern. Echoing the comments of Ms. Cowles and Mr. Wallace, the CPSC should also strengthen its safe sleep messaging by banning crib bumpers. We appreciate that the Commission staff has been directed to develop a performance standard for crib bumpers to reduce hazards of suffocation, and we urge you not to slow this work down. There is no evidence that bumper pads prevent injuries, and there are risks of suffocation, strangulation, and entrapment that greatly outweigh any potential perceived benefit. Further, the AAP supports a ban on supplemental mattresses and play yards, as has also been discussed. These products pose a suffocation hazard to infants, and we are very pleased to see legislation banning them advance recently in New Jersey. The availability of these supplemental mattresses is contradictory to the safety standards for cribs and play yards, and it undermines the efforts to promote safe sleep environments. These regulatory actions, investigation of optimal safe sleep messaging, and sustained public health communication will be central to CPSC efforts to address SUID. Liquid nicotine. We urge the CPSC to continue and expand its efforts to enforce AAP-supported Child Nicotine Prevention Act of 2015. Pediatricians stand ready to work with you and your staff to support these critical enforcement efforts. High-powered magnet sets. The AAP was among the groups strongly supportive of a ban on high-powered magnet sets due to the grave injuries that are caused when they are ingested in multiples. The AAP applauded the 2013 recalls of dangerous products by the CPSC and Health Canada, and the CPSC's 2014 safety standard to make magnets safer and prevent the sale of unsafe magnets after many children suffered critical injuries and even died following ingestion. Recent research shows that the CPSC and Health Canada efforts to ban these high-powered magnets was working to protect children. Researchers set out to study the impact of Canada's recall by comparing data on magnet ingestion at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto during the 2 years before the recall, 2011 and 12, and 2 years after the recall in 2014 and 15. In the 2 early years, there were 22 multiple magnet ingestions, resulting in 6 operations and 9 endoscopic procedures. In the 2 years following the recall, there were only 5 ingestions, requiring only 1 operation and 4 endoscopic procedures. The authors could not determine whether an education campaign alone could have had the same impact as the recall. We were therefore deeply concerned by a decision of a panel of judges on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals to vacate the CPSC rule to ban dangerous, high-powered magnets. We urge the CPSC to reinstate this ban expeditiously, as the court's ruling to overturn the CPSC ban on high-powered magnets jeopardizes children's health and safety. We simply cannot afford to let these life-threatening magnets to find their way back to shelves. TV and furniture tip-overs. The AAP is eager to see the CPSC and industry to do more to prevent furniture and TV tip-overs. We remain deeply saddened that 7 children have died because of unsafe IKEA dressers. These deaths could have and should have been prevented. We are glad to see IKEA finally recall millions of units of the ubiquitous Malm dresser. However, we're concerned by reports that IKEA's recall efforts have been ineffective and that consumers seeking to do the right thing have not gotten adequate or timely responses from IKEA. I can tell you anecdotally, I've spoken with a number of patient families for whom I care that have purchased these dressers, and they have spent hours on the phone trying to meet the recall and remain very frustrated. While we appreciate the educational efforts that both the CPSC and IKEA have made using the Anchor It and Secure It campaigns, the best solution is simply to design a safe dresser that will not tip over and harm or kill children. Like furniture tip-overs, TV tip-overs can result in horrific injuries or even death. Restraints securing these items to the wall can make all the difference, but strengthening the stability performance requirements and the relevant safety standards would be the most effective solution. This may require a mandatory standard from the CPSC to ensure that all manufacturers comply and that all consumers have the opportunity to keep their children safe from this hazard. Thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to provide comments, and I look forward to any questions that you will have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hoffman. And now we will begin with a round of questions by the commissioners, and I will begin myself with questions. So my first question, I'll address it to Ms. Cowles and Mr. Wallace and Dr. Hoffman because it has to do with safe sleep and supplemental mattresses, and you all raised that issue. So as you mentioned, we have been grappling with that issue here at the agency, and my colleague, Commissioner Kay, has advanced the idea to a 104. So I want to just kind of clarify on that issue because you've all expressed a desire to ban a supplemental mattress. Now, our data shows that it's only when the mattress doesn't fit properly that there can be a risk of suffocation. So I want to make sure I understand, is that what do you agree with that, or just in general you're asking for a ban on mattresses?
I can start. There's 2 issues with it. One, certainly an ill-fitting mattress in any type of sleep product is going to be a hazard, and we would strongly recommend standards to avoid that. However, in a mesh-sided product, you have a different hazard, and that's that even if the mattress fits correctly when the mesh sides are in place, a baby who rolls up against the mesh and their head can fit between there because the mesh gives just enough that we do have a 1-inch allowance on crib mattresses for just deviations in manufacturing, can create a gap that the baby can get entrapped in. So there's the safety issue that's clear why they're not used, and because of that issue, that's why all mesh play yards say never use a mattress other than the one that comes with here. So with this, so what we're saying is that we're allowing companies to make a product that in a federal standard says never use. It just seems counterintuitive to me, to parents. You're asking them to ignore a warning. We all know how hard it is to get parents to pay attention to warnings, and if you're selling a product that goes against a warning, you're basically telling them, well, you don't need to pay attention to this warning. So I think that there's those 2 issues, both with the mesh side, even a mattress that appears to fit when the mesh is not pushed against can cause an entrapment hazard, and your again, you have this warning against the very product that people are selling.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace?
Thank you for the question. We agree with what Ms. Cowles has said. We also would point out, as we did in our comments, that the current situation with these products available for sale is misleading to consumers and could all too easily lead to situations with unsafe sleep, and that's why we support the CPSC banning or addressing the risk of injury associated with these mattresses.
Thank you. Dr. Hoffman?
Thank you, Chairman Burkle. I would echo what my colleagues have said. I think the more we learn about parents' behaviors and expectations around safe sleep for their infants, the more we learn that we understand what the best possible recommendations are. But from a practical, realistic standpoint, we know that those can be hard to follow. And anything we do that dilutes the message or offers options that make it unsafe is going to be that's going to hurt babies. And so, simply put, by selling them, I think there's this implicit there's this implicit statement that they might be okay. And if we can't tell parents that they're okay, then they shouldn't be on the market. And I agree with what my colleagues have said.
Thank you. Dr. Hoffman, you mentioned a couple of issues with IKEA and the recall, and that was the first issue. The second issue has to do with unsafe products. I would like to follow up on that. Any of these new unsafe products you're saying are out in the marketplace that should be addressed by us, I would like to have that follow-up conversation with you, and I'm sure my colleagues would be interested as well. And then with regards to customer dissatisfaction with the recall, if you could let us know specifics, if when that occurs, that would be helpful as well. Thank you. Commissioner Adler.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And just because I'm the first commissioner to speak, I will take the opportunity to congratulate you on being nominated to be the permanent chair of the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And I did want to report that your 4 colleagues unanimously joined in a statement congratulating you on your nomination. So we need to put that on the record. And I just wanted to add a personal note that it is a joy to work with you because you always promote an air of civility, and because I consider you to be an honest broker and will work on your political policy views over time. So, Ms. Coles, first of all, thank you so much for your testimony. And I just was sitting here reflecting on the fact that for those who think you can't have an impact on public policy unless you're a big organization, I think you put the lie to that. I cannot think of a group that has had more bang for the buck than kids over the years. And I just look at the track record of achievement at the agency that has been triggered by what KID does. So please keep up your great work. So one of the things you mentioned is pacifiers, and I have to admit that's always one of the golden oldies because we've had a pacifier regulation since the memory of man and woman to the contrary runneth not, as they say. The problem is they're cheap and they're easily made, and so I guess my question is, can you help us figure out a way to make enforcement, which is clear, more effective? I remember we used to have these weekly compliance briefings in which staff constantly would bring in these crappy pacifiers that had been brought in from overseas, and we try to catch them as quickly as we can. But do you have any brilliant, new, innovative, creative, dynamic, and exciting ideas for us?
Well, I'll try and think of them. Thank you. But, our concern is simply, as you mentioned, it's a very old standard. The materials they're made out of now have completely changed from when the standard was adopted. And we do see a lot, as you mentioned, of very cheaply, quickly produced pacifiers that I cannot believe have been tested by a third party, which is now required by the CPSIA because it's a mandatory standard. But we also see recalls and problems with very name brand products that most parents would trust the brand of. So, and again, because of Section 6B, I don't know if it's a problem with the standard itself or a standard of enforcement of the standard when you do find a defect or get a report. There's plenty of reports in saferproducts.gov that could, start an action or start looking at a particular product, but because that's behind the veil, so to speak. I don't know, but what I'm calling for is let's take another look at that, and I will do the same and talk to people about, is it adequate as a standard? Do we need to update it in some way, or is it simply that it needs to be enforced?
Thank you. That's very effective feedback. Mr. Samuels, you touched on one of my favorite safety standards of all time, which is the Refrigerator Safety Act, which is one of those acts that actually improved safety, cut costs, and was easy to implement. I was wondering if you could just give a little additional specificity about your suggestion, and by the way, I completely agree with you. This is just a function of what the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act required of the GCCs, but if you have any notion that you can be more specific about, I'd appreciate it if you'd elaborate.
Well, we'd like to work with you, legal and technical staff, to see if, for example, you could repeal or minimize the certification requirement, or even put in effect an enforcement stay or something like that. I mean, the testing is not an issue because obviously we have to test anyways. But the paperwork is an issue. And as models constantly change, it means paperwork needs to change. There's occasionally issues at customs. So this is a continuing regulatory burden for no benefit. So if we could look at some of the other things you've done in the past, such as the wearing apparel stay of enforcement, maybe that could help us rationalize doing the same thing here. And then ultimately, maybe we have to get the law repealed.
Thank you. That's certainly food for thought. I'm about to run out of time, so Dr. Zuckerman, if I could just ask one quick question. I didn't hear you mention anything with respect to the petition on organohalogens, and I'm wondering if you're involved in that and if you have any interest in attending to testify at a hearing we're going to have on organohalogens.
I'd be very glad to do that. We have not been that involved in it, but it is definitely an issue of concern.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson.
Thank you, and let me also pass on my congratulations to you. We're delighted to have you in this spot. I look at these 5 people sitting in front of me, and I just want to tell you, over the 4 years that I've been here, every one of your groups has made a significant contribution to helping us do our jobs, and I thank you individually, and I thank your organizations. Let me start by just making a couple quick comments. Ms. Coles and Mr. Wallace, your comments about the 104s being moved to DATR, I very, very much share your concern and alarm at that. Unfortunately, when I made a motion to keep it as an FR, I was only able to get the support of Commissioner Kay, so we were not able to keep those on track. So maybe you want to work on some of the other commissioners. And with respect to 6B, I think there are certainly a number of us up here who agree about this being a gag order. I don't think anyone's optimistic we're going to get rid of it. We could have gotten rid of the regulations, however, that are additional hurdles that the Commission passed. And again, I was unable to get other commissioners' support over the 4 years that I've been pushing for that. So you know where your efforts need to be spent. With respect to tip-overs, Ms. Coles, Mr. Wallace, Dr. Hoffman, you all commented on this, and this is an issue in which I have been very intimately involved and strongly involved over my years here. I totally agree with you that we do not see the urgency with respect to the voluntary standard changing, but I think there's more that we should be doing with respect to even making sure that's enforced. I just recently learned of some tricks, if you will, that industries come up with to even bypass that safety standard, which we do not think is adequate in terms of the stops of the drawers, and where people don't actually use the drawers, they're actually stopping the drawers before they're fully extended in order to be able to pass this test. So I am not allowed to ask anybody to advocate to Congress for anything, so I shall not do that. But I wanted to make sure that people were aware of the proposed Sturdy Act, and if any of you would like to make comments on your view on that, I'd be very interested.
I can just say we are aware of it. We support it for the same reason that the Danny's Law and the CPSC has made such a tremendous improvement in the safety of nursery products. We think that sometimes some federal, mandated laws is going to go further in that area.
Anyone else want to comment?
We too support the efforts in Congress to ensure that a new updated standard for furniture stability gets done faster.
And I was not a commissioner when saferproducts.gov was put on the books, but once I got here, I've made a huge effort. My staff and I have worked very hard in trying to get people to be aware of the website and to report to it. We were successful in getting some additional help from the National Center for Child Death Review. We've talked with various lawyer groups, many medical groups, the American Hospital Association, urgent care facilities. We have one group in particular we're trying to get to add a data field, which it took this job to make me understand what a huge effort that is, but to try to get the urgent care facilities under their auspices to report to us. We've worked with medical examiners and hospitals that are not part of NICE. Any ideas that you have with respect to helping us make people aware of this website would be very, very much appreciated.
I mean, I think maybe we can do another workshop on that, because I think that, as you say, it's a tremendous resource, not just for the people that file reports, but for the people that use it to research and learn about problems. One thing I would say, I know early on, I haven't seen the statistics recently, we've been told that about half of the reports you get actually make it onto saferproducts.gov for various reasons. Maybe the consumer said they didn't want it. Maybe they didn't fill out one of the required fields. So any efforts that could be done once someone's taken the trouble to make a report, to be sure that you give them the opportunity to correct what needs to be corrected, to get it filed there, would greatly increase the number of people
Just
using
you know,
it.
we noted that too, and we've been making tremendous efforts on that front. Dr. Hoffman, I'm about to run out of time, but if I could quickly ask you, I'm also concerned about the metrics we're using for measuring the standard on laundry packets and whether it's effective. And could you explain to us where we would get the data for the denominator, as you're suggesting, the affected population?
Yeah, so thank you very much for that question, Commissioner. The denominator that we would look at is the population of children, not the number of laundry packets sold. From my perspective, one child who suffers an injury as a result of a laundry packet ingestion is one child too many. It's 100% preventable. By using the denominator of the number of packets sold, as the market saturation increases, the number of ingestions may not keep pace with that. There may be many more packets sold than there are ingestions. But if we look at the number of ingestions over time, if there are more packets out there, more children are going to be exposed. The denominator should be the number of children the number of children in a given population, and looking at the ingestion risks for those kids, not the number of packets sold.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Robinson. Commissioner Kaye.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations on your nomination. Any day spent in that position trying to do good on behalf of consumers is a wonderful day, but some are more wonderful than others. And the early honeymoon period is certainly qualifies for that. I hope your honeymoon period is long and fruitful. Dr. Hoffman, I would like to start with you. Oh, and by the way, I do want to thank also those who submitted written submissions but did not testify here today. Those are also very helpful. Dr. Hoffman, thank you for coming. I'm extremely impatient when it comes to safety, so I'm not going to wait to have a follow-up conversation on the dangerous products. Can you just tell us now what you're thinking about? You don't have to mention manufacturers if you're not comfortable, but what are the products out there that you think need more attention?
I think my priority personally, and I think the priority of the American Academy of Pediatrics, would be around safe sleep products, first and foremost. Specifically, the baby boxes and supplemental play yard mattresses. I think, as I stated earlier during my testimony, having those things available, I think the public assumes that they're safe. I think they assume that the system is looking out for them and for their children. And the fact of the matter is, in many cases, sadly, it's not. I think window coverings are also, and that's a simple problem that refuses to go away. And I think that that's something that could be easily addressed. And as I mentioned, I think the issue of furniture and television tip-overs, I think that would be our priority. I could go on and on, but I'll stop there unless you have other specific
And are there specific products on the market that are not covered by standards that, beyond the baby boxes, that you're concerned about?
Yeah, and there are a tremendous number. I had an experience earlier this year where one of the non-regulated products, I won't specifically mention it, but it's a supplemental sleep space for an infant designed to either fit in a bassinet or in bed with the parents, stated that it was endorsed by pediatricians. And when we looked through the website, we found it stated that it was endorsed by a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And when we looked on the website, that person was a pediatrician but was not a member of the Academy. And again, I think that those manufacturers and marketers are taking advantage of the innocence of the public, who assume that these things are tested and safe. And as I stated earlier, sleep is such an issue for parents. It's so hard to get through a day, and it's really hard to do the safest possible thing. And anything that exists that makes that more complex makes it more dangerous for babies, and that's just not okay.
Yep, we're on year 12 of still looking forward to getting a good night's sleep.
I'm on year 21, if that helps you feel any, if that makes you feel any worse.
It doesn't make me feel better at all. Dr. Zuckerman, recently there was a voluntary standard that was created on artificial turf, and that I'm guessing you're aware of. Often my experience, and I feel like I've been yelling in the wind for the last number of years about chemical exposure to children in products. It seems often that steps like standard development is a positive, but what I find is how it's interpreted is really the biggest issue, and whether it's misleading. And I'm curious to know what your feeling is about that standard development, and whether you feel like that is a positive, and what you feel like the takeaway for parents should be from that.
Well, the testing just hasn't been very good, and the testing that's been done independently shows, these very dangerous chemicals. So one of the concerns that we have is that because of trade secrets, a lot of the information about what's in these products is not public. It's not publicly available anywhere. And so only through testing done by independent people who are usually not paid by anybody can we find out what the risks are, and even then we don't know exactly what the implications are. But I can say that I know just locally there's a lot of misinformation about the products that are being marketed in a way that says, well, this is virgin rubber, so it doesn't have the same problem as crumb rubber, which is recycled tires. Well, it does. I mean, recycled tires might be worse, but even if a tire has never been used, it still has all of these chemicals in them. So I'm not sure if this is answering your question, but the voluntary standards aren't working and wouldn't work because the companies are selling a product and it's selling like gangbusters. I was just shocked to find out that DC is now using some of this poured in place for sidewalks. I mean, it's also bad for the environment, but that's a whole other issue. But in terms of safety, if we want our children to be safe and we don't want them exposed to these chemicals day in and day out for all the years of, that they're developing as children and then as adults and then pregnant women, we have to do something more than voluntary standards.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Unfortunately, my time expired, but I do plan to submit follow-up questions in writing to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Mohorovic.
Thank you and congratulations, Madam Chairman. Thank you to all of our panelists and those who have submitted written submissions for the Commission. They were very thoughtful, and I appreciated going through them and listening to today's testimony. In a moment or two, I'd like to ask Ms. Coles and Dr. Hoffman for their opinion on baby boxes. Mr. Wallace, I note that you very clearly put a recommendation to the Commission with regards to baby boxes to participate in voluntary standards activity in that area, so I think your position has been well stated. But before baby boxes, I wanted to jump in on this on the point of pacifiers, Ms. Coles, that you brought up. And I wonder openly with, as is the case with many of the children's product regulations, whether or not the standard does adequately provide a sufficient level of safety for the product, or whether it's the fact that the agency, and I'm going to get on my soapbox, refuses to enforce the 1107 rule. That is, consider this, with regards to the submissions on saferproduct.gov, I wonder whether or not it's really product that fails to meet, that would meet the standard and then still failed, or whether or not it's a situation which is common in terms of testing and overseas procurement, where type testing is done to meet a standard. If you like, I have the pacifier standard in front of me with the torque and tension test. It requires one performance test on that product, and a test lab can perform that one time and then provide a test report that shows that that particular product example passed, and then somebody could bring in 100,000 units. Now, this commission very smartly wrote the 1107 rule to address that, which means that when somebody imports or domestically manufactures that, they have to certify that all product is compliant, not just that one example. And it puts the pressure on that importer or domestic manufacturer. For reasons I can't understand, we refuse to hold importers accountable to the full compliance of all the product. They can deliver us a test report for bringing in 100,000 units or something without any explanation in terms of how much testing they did. And there are people here in the audience who I know spend a lot of time thinking about how they would adequately answer a very direct question of a high degree of assurance to the commission. But we refuse to do it. I don't know why we do. So if there's a time you want to talk more about the 1107 rule and its potential application here and in other areas, I think it would make a tremendous impact on safety and get around the one product, one test dynamic that seems to continue to confront us. So sorry for using up a lot of time on my soapbox with the 1107 rule. Mr. Samuels, I'm reminded by a conversation I had 3 years ago with a former FCC chairman, FCC commissioner in the late 90s, who found telegraph standards still on the books at the FCC and was astonished by how difficult it was. It is laughable, Dr. Zuckerman, how difficult he found it was to remove from the books telegraph standards which were completely outdated and redundant. But having been part of the Commission's solicitation of enforcement guidance on a nuanced area of certification obligation, I don't think I can be your champion with that, but perhaps the rest of the Commission might see to it. I also openly opine whether or not there's really a desire for certification for general use products. That is the non-children's products. I can certainly see a strong reason, I share that reason for a need for certification for the children's products, but I openly wonder how much value it gives to ask for paperwork requirements for certification to a carpet standard and to a garbage can standard, which are standards that are on the books. And with that, I've left you less than a minute. Ms. Coles, I apologize, on baby boxes and Dr. Hoffman.
Yes, so I'll just talk briefly. All of us are involved in this product. This was a product that has really gained popularity because of a huge marketing push by the companies that make them. So this isn't a grassroots, people saw the cardboard box and said, oh gosh, that's what I want my baby to sleep in. It is modeled after Finland, as we all know, and as the Finnish doctors say, really, out of our whole system, you picked the cardboard box to be your example of what was good. But we have a lot of concerns. I recommend that you look at a new review that just came out from the editor, or the authors of Baby Bargains, which was actually originally brought to me by Linda Ginzel almost 20 years ago, because it is the one baby book that talks a lot about safety, and they found a lot of flaws with the product, at least as they could get it. The biggest concern with it is it outlives its usefulness somewhere between 3 and 6 months, the very point at which the child is at the highest risk of SUID and SIDS. And so at that point, they're going to be moved to an unsafe environment.
Dr. Hoffman, my apologies, but I'm out of time. Forgive me.
Thank you. We're going to have a second round of questions. All of the commissioners have said they have other questions, as do I. So I'm just going to make it quick. Dr. Zuckerman, you referred to a number of studies in your testimony with regards to maybe there was one author that had conflicts, and then you talked about a sperm study. Could you present us with those studies for the record, and so that we can have the opportunity to look at those?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And my written statement that I did ahead of time is very heavily footnoted.
Okay.
I have a revised written version that is a little bit different, but the sperm study just came out. But it's a meta-analysis of something like 160 studies that had already been done in the United States and other countries. It's very consistent that sperm counts and quality is less than half of what it was.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. Thank you very much. I do want to address one issue that's come up a little bit this morning, and that is the 104s. And when we were discussing in our mid-year, there is, and I just want to assure all of you and the public in general that there's been no diminishing desire to handle 104s. We just respected what staff was interested in doing, and that is making some sense out of the order of things, that we have complied with our requirement by Congress to do our 2 104s every month, but there is, and we've satisfied that requirement, but it was more out of respect for staff and their workload that we took that opportunity. But I just want to assure everyone that there is no desire to push back or to not follow up with our 104 requirements. So I just wanted to add that. And I wanted to also just talk briefly about our Safe Sleep campaign, and that is Bear is Best. That addresses anything in the crib, whether it's a bumper or a pillow or anything else. And I want to just ask you, and I say it's a yes or no answer, but is that an adequate message? Bear is best.
It's a hard message when those products are still on store shelves. And so consumers don't really know CPSC policy. They know that when they go into a store, whatever they can buy, they're assuming is safe. Someone made sure it's safe. We have bumpers in there. We have some of the other products that the doctor was talking about and that we see every day. You know, I was just approached by my nephew at a wedding this weekend who the first thing he said to me, totally impromptu, was, you know what makes me mad? Everyone tells me not to use bumpers, and they're all over the stores. And I said, oh, that's my issue. So, but your message is very good. Bear is best, that's what we say, and that's why we oppose bumpers, because they dilute that message.
Thank you. Dr. Hoffman?
And I would agree that it's a good message. It's not enough. The simple fact is, as Ms. Callis stated, if these products are available, people will assume they're okay. And I see the effects of that every day. And talking with families, as a pediatrician, I receive those questions constantly. And I can talk about it. I can convince parents sometimes not to use them once they've started, but it would be much better to not have them begin, and they wouldn't begin using them if they weren't available.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Adler?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Ms. Coles, I wanted to look at page 5 of your testimony and just ask for a clarification. You said the current method for testing small parts is not optimally designed to prevent dangerous toys from being sold to consumers, and one of the points you talk about is the size of the container measuring the products that are going onto the market. And I'm wondering, is that the primary concern you were mentioning? Because there's also the use and abuse test that subjects products to use and abuse to see if they survive that, and then they're tested. But is that part of your concern, or is it just the size of the small parts container?
We think both need to be looked at. So we did a study that was peer-reviewed and published that looked at both recalls and safer product reports, where we found that there were choking incidents of products that would fit or would not fit, so would pass the small parts test. So the question is whether is our use and abuse testing enough, that we're catching things that break into small parts, and then with all the way that children's anthropometric data has changed since we set that size, is it the right size now for today's 2, almost 3-year-old that we're trying to protect?
Thank you for that. I do know the staff is looking into that, and I'm in a continuing dialogue with them, so thank you again for raising that issue. Dr. Zuckerman, your comments about crumb rubber really hit me very hard, and I have to commend Commissioner Kay at this point, because he's the one who's been pushing the Commission to work so diligently on crumb rubber. And you're absolutely right about a multitude of industry-sponsored standards. I still remember meeting with industry representatives, and they would come in with a packet of studies this thick, literally. And what their argument was is, boy, those are terrible, terrible toxic chemicals, but thank God for the miracle of modern chemistry, because they're all bound in so much they're not released. And that still is the big issue before the Commission at this point. So I guess my question to you is, are you aware, just as you were mentioning this other recent study, are you aware of studies that actually address the degree of off-gassing and the degree of actual hazard associated with crumb rubber? Because nobody argues about the toxicity of the chemicals, but there are big arguments about whether they ever get released.
I'm happy to provide that. I mean, Yale and
That's
some
really
other
what I'm
places
asking,
have
yeah.
been doing studies. The crumb rubber, which is usually black, all you have to do is see children playing with it. They're covered with black stuff all over their hands and sometimes their faces. How anybody could say that's not going to get chemicals inside their body, either through their skin or their mouths, I don't know. But what concerns me also is that as parents have become aware and some municipalities have become aware of those concerns, instead they're now being sold this new product, the poured in place, which, as I said, it's beautiful. I mean, you get these surfaces that are bright colors, they're very pretty, and they feel a little bouncy, and yet they have more injuries, apparently, than things like wood chips underneath monkey bars and slides and swings and things like that. And they also have more concussions. So exactly the opposite of what you'd think. I remember when crumb rubber came, I thought, wow, this is great. You recycle tires and it's safe. It seemed like a really great idea, but there is a lack of research and we need more research. I'm sorry to take up so much time, but who's going to pay for the research? That's a big issue.
Thank you for that. And I get one last quick question. Dr. Hoffman, I did note when you said rather than reduce regulations, we believe the CPSC has the capacity to do more. That seems to put you at odds with a recent executive order from the White House that says for every, and by the way, we're not bound by that, but for every new regulation, an agency should withdraw two existing regulations. I'm curious if the American Academy of Pediatrics has taken a position one way or the other on what has to be, forgive me, one of the stupidest executive orders ever issued.
I don't believe we've taken an official stance, but our emphasis is the well-being of kids. And if you're talking about what's best for kids, and we're dealing with issues of availability of product and safety of product, I think the public has an implicit assumption that products that are on the shelves are safe. And if it's a question of increasing regulation to increase that level of safety to protect children's lives, then I think that that's what has to happen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Adler. I guess my honeymoon's over. Commissioner Robinson.
Mr. Wallace, I'd like to talk about portable generators for a minute. As you know, we're after many, many, many years of trying to get industry to make these generators safer in terms of carbon monoxide emissions. We're starting to make some progress finally, I think. And I know you know about our NPR. I'm set next week to go to Wisconsin and visit some of the generator manufacturers and see what they've come up with. But I was very interested in the comment on the top of page 6 of your written submission that says that Consumer Reports is exploring potential changes to the testing to account for portable generators' carbon monoxide emissions. And I wondered what you were doing.
Still under development, but we are interested in assessing these products for the extent to which they pose this hazard, and comparing them against one another. If these products, if individual portable generator models might provide a greater margin of safety for consumers or a lower one.
So I'm told, at least, that it's technologically feasible now both to lower emissions significantly by over 90%, and also that there is something that's looking pretty good in terms of a shutoff mechanism. Have you gotten to the point in your process in terms of testing to be able to tell us which way you're going to go in your testing?
For our testing, we haven't. It's still under development. But
Okay.
but in terms of our position, we stated it that a comprehensive standard would involve both a prevention and a detection approach.
Right. Okay, great. And Ms. Coles, I wanted to ask you, I wanted to follow up on this product registration card complaint. It's obviously a very serious one since we're all inundated with ads constantly, and that we take that very seriously. But did you report this to the CPSC?
I did. It was actually, it came to my knowledge from an article
Okay.
that a reporter happened to be one of the people on the list and who reported this. I did. I reported it to CPSC. I reported it to the company, who assured me it was a one-time thing, although it's hard to believe the one time was when a reporter was on the list.
yeah.
But Yes, so I believe they're taking it seriously, and again, 6B, I have no idea what you're doing,
Okay.
but I did report it.
Okay,
yes.
great. And please keep us apprised if there are any other problems. Dr. Zuckerman, I wanted to follow up on your comments about phthalates and tell you that I very much share your concern about how incredibly long it has taken us, but I'm told that we should be getting a package shortly, that we're going to be considering a final rule. And I just wondered if you had submitted comments. Commissioner Adler asked you about the organohalogens, but with respect to phthalates, have you submitted comments to our staff to be considered?
Yes, I believe we've been talking about it for several years at our center, and we've spoken before and submitted before, so I'll check and make sure. I'm sorry, the one thing I forgot to say is that the other thing about crumb rubber and these other materials is that that bacteria can grow there. And so there's actually a young woman at American University who was playing ultimate frisbee. You would not think the most dangerous, athletic issue, and she almost died because after getting an injury that did not get any better, basically a burn type injury from a turf burn, the bacteria got in and nearly killed her. So MRSA and other very dangerous bacteria can live in these materials, and so if a person gets an injury that opens up a wound, it can be deadly.
Mr. Samuels, I just wanted to follow up with respect to water filters. And first of all, thank you for your efforts, and thank you for coming and sharing what you had found. What else could we do here at the CPSC to work with CBP to keep out the counterfeit water filters? Obviously, counterfeit products generally is a huge problem for us, as it is for other agencies, particularly FDA. But I don't know what we could do with respect to water filters to help out.
Well, one thing is, if you could communicate to customs that you consider this to be a significant issue because of the safety aspects, they are overwhelmed with the counterfeit problem. I mean, they're organized to deal with it, but there are lots and lots of counterfeit products in the United States. We would argue that this would have a higher priority than some because of the safety issues, and if you could communicate that would be very helpful. We also want to work with you on joint education campaigns. Maybe you can help us engage.
In terms of detecting the counterfeit water filters?
Yes, and
Okay,
engage with retailers. I mean, I think there's various things that we can do together that would be very helpful. We're not going to get rid of this problem entirely, but we can try and limit it.
Well, being from Michigan, obviously the idea that the Flint residents would get counterfeit water filters was pretty gut-wrenching when you came in. I'm out of time, but thank you, and we
Thanks.
look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Samuels, obviously, as you mentioned, we cannot engage legally unless there is a safety issue that's demonstrable. So I would just request, please, that you provide us with whatever data testing in particular that you've done and plan to do that demonstrates the safety concerns, so that we would have something to look at, and then as appropriate, engage CBP, or the chairman could engage CBP. Dr. Zuckerman, just as follow-up to what you're saying about the artificial turf, it's the exact conversation I had with my 12-year-old, my older son, in the car on the way home from picking him up from camp yesterday, because he slid annoyingly on an artificial turf surface during camp and did open up a wound. And I had that exact conversation because he said, well, he tried to pull the fibers apart and nothing came apart, so he didn't understand how that could get in his skin. And I was explaining to him about the bacteria. We have very exciting car rides home after I get them from camp. So I appreciate that you raising that concern. Ms. Coles, you and actually Dr. Hoffman touched on something that has been a theme for many years of the agency, and a frustration, which is that parents have an expectation that products that they use, especially for their young children, have to have been tested, just have to be safe. It just cannot be that those things can be sold unless somebody has tested them and made sure they're safe. You filled the gap significantly with the work that you did on Danny's Law, and thank you for that. I am concerned, though, as the Commission continues to move through its implementation, what the future will mean for that law. And there have been different theories put forward about how to interpret it. And since you were the drafter, along with Jan Schakowsky, of that provision back in 2001 and then forward up through 2008, how should the Commission interpret Section 104, Danny's Law, as we go forward? Is it a static law in your mind, that the list that was developed in '08 and has been supplemented first, I guess, in '09 and then a little bit since then, is that it? Or is it a dynamic statute? Was the intention on your part and the drafters to have it be dynamic and to continue to address products that might not be on the list but present hazards for young children?
Obviously, it was the second. I mean, our goal at the very beginning when we looked at it, as you said, it was simply that durable infant and toddler products, products that you use to care for the most vulnerable consumers, should be tested by an independent laboratory to a strong standard. And so the list we came up with in 2001 was the list of current ASTM standards, because that was the universe of those kind of products. We've added to it, but we certainly see this as a rule-making provision that will go forward as long as there's a CPSC to be used whenever new products, either a new product presents itself and needs a standard because it's completely new. I mean, we can't imagine that the development of products is going to be stagnant, given how many new ones we're seeing. Or that a product that has been there but didn't rise to the level either as durable or presenting enough hazards to rise to someone's attention now has presented a hazard, now is made in such a way that it is a durable product and needs to be added to that. So we certainly see this as an ongoing rulemaking mechanism for CPSC for any durable infant and toddler products.
Great. I hope you'll continue to be a vocal proponent of that view. I share your view, and I am concerned in the next number of years that that might not be a universally accepted viewpoint, and I think it's important that you continue to stay engaged so that view has a voice on the outside, and certainly will continue to have a voice on the inside. Dr. Hoffman, one of the aspects that comes up often with pediatricians is this idea that they should be our mouthpiece at that moment of engagement when families come in to visit with pediatricians. I've been skeptical for a long time of that viewpoint from my own experiences when I talk to our pediatrician, and she even knows what I do for a living, and so she has added incentive to try to get as much into that conversation as she can. But I wonder how realistic it is really to give you and give pediatricians the responsibility to try to fit into that 10 to 20 minute period, if it's even that, when you see parents, and especially parents of young children, infants, knowing what is going on in their head and how exhausted they are and how distracted they are and how difficult it is, what's your level of expectation, or what should our level of expectation be as to how much can be communicated during that visit?
Thank you very much for that question, Commissioner. I think it absolutely is our responsibility, but as you suggested, I think the system often makes that difficult. What's prioritized for us from a fiscal standpoint, or for physicians in general, is quick visits in and out. And that does make it more difficult, especially with exhausted new parents who may need more information. Injury prevention recommendations and anticipatory guidance are one of the few things that should span that our guidelines and the Bright Futures guidelines state should span every single visit. I assure you that as a pediatrician, I talk more about safety than almost anybody. And even then, I know that a lot of families don't always hear what I'm saying. And so there is a big challenge. So while I do feel strongly it is our responsibility, it's not going to be enough. We'll continue to do better. We'll continue to produce policy that is practical and evidence-based. And we will do our best to disseminate that. But we need to work as partners with government and non-governmental organizations to help spread the message and to make it as simple as possible for parents to do the right thing.
Great, thank you for that. And even though I didn't consult you as a pediatrician on my son's injury from yesterday, I did end up treating it multiple times with Neosporin, just so you know.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kaye. Commissioner Mohorovic.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thanks for the second round. And if you're not too exhausted, Dr. Hoffman, thanks for being patient. If you could provide any of your thoughts in terms of recommendations for the CPSC with baby boxes.
Yeah, so I think my experience with baby boxes is that A lot of parents are really excited by the possibility because I think it's a disruptive idea. And I think disruptive ideas, especially in the blogosphere, tend to get a lot of traction. They become cool and sexy, for lack of a better word. It's hard to imagine a box being sexy. I loved what Ms. Cowell said about if we chose to import one thing from Scandinavian healthcare systems, that it would be a box to put babies in. I think the issues, the biggest issues that I see, number one, is that there is no evidence that they are safe. And this is a place when we're talking about newborns and the leading cause of death that's preventable for babies. Now, I want to be very clear. There are more babies every year who die from SUID than all children die from cancer. This is a huge issue. Anything we do that makes it harder for parents to do the safest possible thing to allow their babies to thrive is going to put babies in danger. We don't know that the boxes are safe. We know they have a limited lifespan. We don't know where parents are supposed to put them. Are they supposed to be in bed? Are they supposed to be on the floor? We don't know what the sleep surface should be, or it doesn't have, there are no standards to address that. All of the studies that I'm aware of that either have been done or are being done are sponsored by industry, which I find concerning. The other issue, and I deal with this on a regular basis in a very practical way with our safety center, the price point for boxes is not that much less than for play yards, which meet standards and have been tested and been demonstrated to be safe. And the biggest argument that I heard initially from advocates of baby boxes was the price issue and the ability to get them out to families so that every family would potentially have a safe sleep space. We know that many families who have a safe sleep space will not utilize it in the safest possible way, but we know 100% of families who do not have a safe sleep space will not be utilizing one. As I look at baby boxes, we have a reasonable alternative. The price point is not that different. The alternative meets standards until we know better, until we can guarantee the public that baby boxes are safe. They scare me to death.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for providing that. It's been an issue, a product that has been on my mind for several years now too. So thanks, Ms. Coles, and also Dr. Hoffman. The only point that I would take issue with from your response would be that I would think Justin Timberlake and Andy Samberg would disagree and say that boxes can be quite sexy, especially around the Valentine's period. So I'll just make sure that that's on the record. Dr. Zuckerman, you provided some testimony with regards to artificial turf and crumb rubber, and there's been questions today. I appreciate that. You asked that the CPSC provide a warning. While the study is still underway, what would be your recommendation of what a responsible warning the CPSC could provide generally at this time?
I think a warning could say we're studying it, and we're studying it because there are known carcinogens in the product, and we're trying to figure out, how safe it is. I don't think you have to say it's unsafe. I think you have to say we're studying it because we have these concerns and because there are toxic chemicals in these products that are then come into the air. I think that helps people understand that it's not just, well, I'm wearing shoes when I'm on this surface, so what difference does it make? But to understand that you're breathing it in and it's getting in your body too.
Well, thank you, Dr. Zuckerman. I promise you I'll review what our messaging has been on this in the past to see whether or not it satisfies. Dr. Hoffman, not to pick on you again, but coming all the way from Oregon, one thing I'll just leave you with. In the workshop yesterday on recall effectiveness, one of the points that was brought up in terms of a fantastic time to be able to message to consumers about recalls and raise awareness does occur in the pediatrics waiting room or in the visiting room. And I bet this commission would be very receptive to any ideas in terms of partnership for communication that AAP would like to put together with the commission. So I'll just leave you with that as a thought.
I'm sure we'd be delighted to help. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you all very much. Hearing no further questions, I want to thank all of our panelists this morning, Ms. Coles, Mr. Samuels, Dr. Zuckerman, Mr. Wallace, and Dr. Hoffman. Thank you all very much for taking the time to be here to provide your testimony and to be so gracious in answering our questions. With that, I will now adjourn this hearing for 5 minutes. We'll take a break. We'll reset the table for our second panel. And again, our sincere thanks to all of you.
There we go.
Don't have to hold.
Welcome back. We will now begin and resume our hearing this morning with our second panel, which includes Ms. Kathleen McGuigan from the Retail Industries Association, Leaders Association, Ms. Rachel Weintraub from the Consumer Federation of America, Mr. Remington Gregg from Public Citizen, Ms. Kristen Kern from the American Apparel and Footwear Association, and Ms. Autumn Moore from the Toy Association. Good morning to all of you and welcome. Again, thank you for taking the time and the resources to be here this morning to provide this agency with your valuable input. With that, we will begin with Ms. McGuigan.
Thank you. Good morning, Acting Chairman, Commissioners, and staff. I'm Kathleen McGuigan, Senior Vice President and Deputy General Counsel for the Retail Leaders Association. By way of background, RELA members include some of the largest and most innovative retailers. The retail industry employs 42 million Americans and accounts for $1.5 trillion in annual sales. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today regarding the Commission's fiscal year 2018 and 2019 agenda and budget priorities. RELA has previously submitted detailed written comments on the level of resources it believes the Commission should allocate for various agency activities in 2018 and 2019. It is not my intention to repeat that testimony. What I really want to do today is highlight 4 areas and expand upon 4 areas that were in my written testimony. First, I want to express my gratitude of our membership for the opportunity to participate in yesterday's recall effectiveness workshop to bring about significant improvement in the effective communication of product hazards to consumers to quickly remove defective and non-compliant products from the marketplace will take real partnership among all stakeholders. Yesterday's event demonstrated stakeholders' genuine desire to have a positive impact. We hope that yesterday's workshop will not be a check the box or a one-time event. For progress to be made on recall effectiveness and other critical product safety related issues, there will need to be ongoing and continuing engagement. Over the past several years, RELA has advocated for the CPSC to establish a formal advisory committee under the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Such a committee has several advantages. The format of FACA provides a structure and forum for ongoing discussions on topics between the agency and stakeholders. Also, the FACA is a permanent structure and thus ensures that agency engagement with stakeholders is on an ongoing basis without being subject to changing agency leadership and preferences or personal philosophy on stakeholder engagement. We continue to urge the CPSC to explore the possibility of establishing a formal advisory committee under FACA to enable it to continue the type of engagement necessary to bring about transformational change. Let me turn now to my second topic, and the next couple will talk about areas where we think that the agency should dedicate some of its resources. The CPSC, as the primary federal agency with authority over the safety of consumer products, has a long-held position that it is a data-driven agency, in that its decisions and rulemakings are based upon sound data and science. In today's rapidly changing marketplace, the volume of data that is relevant to important product safety issues is increasing at an exponential rate. The collection and analysis of data are now an important part of government and industry strategic planning and daily operations. For the CPSC to meet its core mission, it is critical that the CPSC invest in internal or external staff, IT systems, and software resources to enhance the agency's data collection and predictive data analytics capabilities. Without such resources, the agency will fall woefully behind and will not be able to protect U.S. consumers. One area that the Commission should consider dedicating increased resources is the expansion and formalization of the so-called retail reporting program. When the RRP was created, it was intended to capitalize upon the wealth of information that retailers and manufacturers gather about customers' interaction with products. The original concept was that the CPSC would analyze this information from disparate sources to identify emerging product safety risks and defect trends. In doing so, the CPSC could work with manufacturers and retailers to recall defective products much earlier than the current timeline, thereby preventing untold injuries and property damage. This idea at the time was truly unique and really ahead of its time. The challenge for the CPSC in achieving the full benefits of the RRP is that until recently, IT and data analytics tools had not yet been developed that could handle multiple reporting companies, and the volume and complexity of the information provided. As a result, the RRP has stagnated, participation has closed, and the CPSC has never fully utilized the data provided for the purposes of predictive analytics. What was impossible at the time of the creation of the RRP is commonplace in 2017. Today, there are IT resources and data analytics solutions that can handle millions of data points and predictive analytic tools that enable government and business to identify patterns and trends and even predict consumer behavior. We urge the CPSC to invest in staff and resources to expand its data collection and predictive analytic capabilities. We further urge the CPSC to expand the RRP pilot and to use technology to create a tool that allows any reporting entity to file an electronic Section 15B report. Of course, for any electronic tool that is developed by the CPSC to be embraced by industry needs to be what we heard from yesterday about recall solutions. It needs to be easy to use and cost effective. If the CPSC moves forward in this direction, it's critical that it engage with and get input from stakeholders during the development process. To test the usefulness and ease of use of any electronic reporting tool, the CPSC should conduct a pilot program with interested partners to provide feedback. In addition, a pilot would now allow the CPSC to gain experience and expertise using new data analytics software. My third topic continues the technology theme, and in this instance, it specifically relates to the emerging technologies like IoT that are being incorporated into consumer products. It truly is amazing to think that the iPhone was only introduced 10 years ago, in 2007. Today, smartphones are viewed by many consumers to be a necessary part of their daily life. I can tell you that my 3 college-age daughters absolutely believe this to be true. IoT technology is being incorporated into a wide array of consumer and industrial products, from smart door locks, security cameras, in-home appliances, electronics, smart cars, personal care products, and wearables. The potential list of IoT products is endless. While these IoT products are meeting consumers' demand for increased convenience, they also create cybersecurity, privacy, and safety challenges. Currently, there are multiple federal agencies, including the FTC, NHTSA, Commerce, DHS, that are grappling with IoT issues. Industry, trade, consumer advocates, and NGOs are also looking at these issues. To make sure that the CPSC is prepared to proactively tackle the complex IoT-related issues, it is critically important that the CPSC dedicate resources and staffing to gain an understanding of these new innovative technologies and to engage with government agencies and partners. The goal of these efforts should be to develop a comprehensive risk-based approach to regulation of IoT products to address privacy, cybersecurity, and consumer safety concerns while promoting innovation and new product development. As part of this approach, we urge the CPSC to adopt a risk-based reasonableness standard for product safety for IoT products similar to the FTC's reasonableness standard for data privacy. The FTC understands that creating an impenetrable barrier against cyber hacking is impossible. So instead, it requires companies to have a reasonable data security program that takes into consideration the sensitivity of the data collected, the scale and scope of operations, and the level of risk if a breach occurs. The development of new technologies and product is moving at lightning speed, and it is moving forward with or without the CPSC. In order for the CPSC to continue to be relevant and to protect consumers, the CPSC must invest in internal staff or external staff and resources to proactively address this issue now. Failure to do so will undermine the agency's core safety mission. The last topic that I want to discuss is an area where I think the agency can save some money and reallocate resources. And and at the same time enhance its import surveillance program. The CPSC is a small agency with limited resources, and it has limited, even more limited amount to conduct. I'm so sorry.
I apologize. Your 10 minutes is expired.
I'm
and
sorry.
Hopefully we'll get to questions. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Ms. Weintraub.
Thank you very much. Acting Chairman Burkle, congratulations on your nomination, and to all the commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the CPSC's FY 2018 and 2019 priorities. I am Rachel Weintraub, Legislative Director and General Counsel at Consumer Federation of America, a nonprofit association of approximately 280 pro-consumer groups founded in 1968 to advance the consumer interests through advocacy and education. Continuing to effectively implement the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act should remain a high priority. Because of the rules promulgated under the CPSIA, infant durable products must now meet robust mandatory standards. The 2011 crib standard, with third-party testing and certification requirements, is of particular significance, as it is the strongest crib standard in the world and offers our nation's infants a safe sleep environment which their parents have a right to expect. We urge the CPSC to continue to commit the staff time and resources necessary to prioritize the promulgation of these rules under Section 104, and we are very concerned about CPSC's recent delay of the standards for high chairs and stationary activities centers, but appreciate the comments this morning. Another high priority for the CPSC should continue to be saferproducts.gov. 33,595 reports have been posted to saferproducts.gov as of earlier this month, and it continues to be an important tool for consumers, researchers, doctors, coroners, and the CPSC. Based on our analysis in a report from last November, we recommend that the CPSC continue to explore how to make saferproducts.gov even more useful and accessible to consumers, including increasing promotion of the site, expanding the data sources included in saferproducts.gov, releasing overall reports on data trends, and improving data categories and searchability. There are a number of product safety hazards that the CPSC should prioritize or further prioritize. On emerging hazards, we applaud the CPSC's work on hoverboards, but hazards remain, incidents continue, and recalls continue even to this week. We applaud this work, but we also urge the CPSC to make sure that the recalls are working and are effective and are useful for consumers. On crumb rubber, we urge the CPSC to quickly provide concrete information for consumers about the safety of this material. On laundry packets, we urge the CPSC to remain engaged in the voluntary standards process and to carefully monitor incidents to determine whether more actions are necessary. On window coverings, due to the persistent hazard that cords on window coverings pose to children, CFA, KID, Parents for Window Blind Safety, and others filed a petition with the CPSC in 2013 requesting a prohibition of accessible window covering cords. Despite 6 industry attempts to develop adequate voluntary standards, there were at least 184 deaths due to strangulation and 101 severe injuries caused by cords on window coverings from 1996 through 2012, and at least 11 children die each year as a result of cords on window coverings. Deaths and injuries can be eliminated by designs that are already available on the market, cordless technology and cord cover designs. While the comment period just ended for the voluntary standard, we urge the Commission to promulgate a strong mandatory safety standard that will reduce confusion in the marketplace, lead to more homes with safe products, and eliminate the strangulation risk for consumers, and children in particular. On all-terrain vehicle safety and off-highway vehicle safety, according to the most recent data released by the CPSC, at least 97,200 people were injured while riding all-terrain vehicles seriously enough to require emergency room treatment in 2015. The estimated number of ATV-related fatalities was 674 in 2014, though the 2014 data is not considered complete, and the number of fatalities will almost certainly grow as more data is received. From our own data that CFA compiles with our with our On-Road Safety Coalition, we know that as of July 18th of 2017, we have documented 260 fatalities for 2017 alone, and in July alone, we have documented 41 deaths. We urge the CPSC to complete the ATV rulemaking, which should include a serious analysis of the safety hazards posed to children by ATVs, the adequacy of existing ATV safety training and training materials, and efforts to ensure that children are not riding ATVs that are too large and too powerful for them. In addition, we urge the CPSC to prioritize the increasing epidemic of operating OHVs and ATVs and ROVs on roads. High-powered magnet sets. We were alarmed by the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit decision that struck down CPSC's high-powered magnet set rule that we supported strongly. We are concerned by the consequences of that decision, and already more rare earth magnets are entering the market, creating hidden hazards that could severely injure or even kill a child who swallows more than one of these. We urge that the CPSC take strong action to ensure that doctors and consumers are educated about these hazards, as well as work to reissue the rule. On furniture tip-overs, according to CPSC's data, every 2 weeks a child dies and more than 38,000 children are injured annually as a result of a piece of furniture, appliance, or television tipping over. Between 2000 and 2011, there were 349 tip-over-related deaths. 2/3 of those deaths involved toddlers. The ASTM standard for furniture must be improved to more effectively protect the public, and hazardous products must be removed effectively from the marketplace. We urge the CPSC to prioritize this and continue their work. On flame retardants in consumer products, flame retardant chemicals are found in numerous types of consumer products and are associated with serious human health problems, including cancer, reduced sperm count, learning deficits, hyperactivity, and hormone disruption. These chemicals migrate from household products into air and dust. As a result, 97% of U.S. residents have measurable quantities of toxic flame retardants in their blood. Children are especially at risk because they come into greater contact with household dust than adults. Studies show that children whose developing brains and reproductive organs are most vulnerable have 3 to 5 times higher levels of flame retardants than their parents. We urge the CPSC to prioritize this issue, docket our petition, and take effective steps to protect consumers from the health hazards posed by flame retardants while not diminishing fire safety protections. On recall effectiveness, we appreciate the workshop yesterday. We think it was the beginning of an important dialogue, and we urge the continuation of a dialogue so that we can have concrete conversations about the factors that are essential to the most well-publicized, most effective recalls, so that this can be replicated with all recalls. And we recommend the need to consider more robust approaches to recall communication, the use of incentives, and how to use innovative technologies to improve recall effectiveness in the future. And we look forward to those ongoing conversations. On civil penalties, civil and criminal penalties serve an important deterrent effect to non-compliance with the laws enforced by the CPSC, and we urge the CPSC to prioritize this important element of its enforcement. We urge the agency to continue to collect penalties when the violations represent problematic disregard for the CPSC's laws. In conclusion, we urge the CPSC to continue to strengthen its efforts to fulfill its mission to protect consumers from hazards posed by consumer products. We urge the CPSC to consider including the additional priority issues that we outlined in our statement today and our written testimony that we submitted earlier, and we note the urgency of these issues. We look forward to continuing to work with the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Weintraub. Mr. Gregg?
Thank you, Acting Chairman Burkle, members of the Commission. Good afternoon. I'm Remington A. Gregg, Counsel for Civil Justice and Consumer Rights at Public Citizen. Public Citizen represents the public interest through lobbying, litigation, administrative advocacy, research, and public education on a broad range of issues that include product safety and consumer rights in the marketplace. On behalf of our 400,000 members and supporters, thank you for giving us an opportunity to provide recommendations to the Commission as you determine the agency's priorities for FY 2018 and 2019. At the outset, we express our support for the Commission's strategic plan and look forward to working with the Commission to ensure successful implementation. Moreover, we are committed to working with the CPSC and our coalition partners on addressing a wide range of issues, including aggressively addressing well-documented product hazards, by adopting mandatory standards on table saws and window covering cords, hazards related to furniture and TV tip-overs, and closely monitoring the implementation of the voluntary standards to shield children from dangerous liquid laundry packets. This comment, however, will focus on two issues that Public Citizen plans to work closely on with the CPSC during the next fiscal years, ensuring a more data-driven agency and increased transparency to effectuate the agency's mission. The CPSC strategic plan states that, quote, agency access to useful, accurate, and timely data is a cross-cutting priority focus, and that the agency consistently looks for ways to improve the quality, transparency, reliability, and availability of data essential for achieving the agency's strategic objectives, goals, and mission, end quote. We strongly support the CPSC's goal for using data to become a more efficient and effective agency for consumers and urge the Commission to continue collecting timely and comprehensive data that will help the agency more effectively advance its mission. We also strongly support the Consumer Product Safety Database, saferproducts.gov, and encourage the Commission to enhance its utility. If administered correctly, it can serve as a central national repository for critical product safety information, therefore serving as an impactful CPSC tool to avert injury or death to the public. For example, we urge the Commission to further strengthen saferproducts.gov by increasing its visibility and use by the public. We recommend that the CPSC make the website's visibility a top priority and dedicate resources to advertising it on social media and in any media statements or responses issued by the Commission, as well as using other forms of social media to push out critical information. Moreover, CPSC should explore innovative and tech-savvy ways to convey information on recalls. For example, the Commission could consider agency action that allows consumers to opt in to receiving text messages if a product is recalled. This type of feedback loop would give the CPSC real-time metrics to understand the number of people who are receiving information on a recall, which in turn would help the Commission better understand if it is effectively disseminating important information. Second, the CPSC should do more to increase transparency in the decision-making process by improving information disclosure to the public. We place particular significance on strengthening information disclosures issued pursuant to Section 6B of the Consumer Product Safety Act. Since the Commission issued the NPRM in February 2014 to amend the 30-year-old rule implementing Section 6B, the rulemaking has seen little traction. We urge the Commission to continue with the proposed rulemaking without further delay. Unfortunately, 6B has restrained the Commission in its ability to proactively disclose safety hazards to the public. 6B negatively affects consumers by unnecessarily shielding critical product safety information from public view. Section 6B is outdated, anti-consumer, and intended solely to protect the reputation of businesses that put harmful products on the market. Landmark right-to-know laws like the Freedom of Information Act do not have a similar overbroad restriction for information disclosures, and instead have tightly focused exemptions focused on real business interests, such as protecting trade secrets. There is no legitimate justification for this law, and Congress should eliminate it. We encourage the CPSC to make the case to Congress. We, in turn, will do the same. Until Congress eliminates Section 6B, the CPSC must prioritize the rulemaking process to increase proactive disclosures by the Commission. Section 6B's equally outdated implementing regulations, which are overly pro-industry, because they allow manufacturers to weigh in on or outright object to product safety information before the Commission, may disclose such information to the public. Essentially, 6B requires the Commission to negotiate every communication that names a manufacturer or company. Some provisions of the 30-year-old rule are emblematic of the avoidable obstacles that thwart the Commission's ability to modernize and advance consumer safety. Advances in technology and communication since the rule's adoption have gone unaddressed. One obvious example is the Commission's inability to publicly disseminate information that has already been publicly disclosed, which simply gives businesses and manufacturers another built-in opportunity to influence the process before releasing critical product safety information. Section 6B puts American lives and health at risk with burdensome procedures and delays that block public disclosure of crucial information on dangerous products. 6B is a relic that handcuffs one of the Commission's core regulatory functions, its ability to warn the public about potentially defective products. It also compels the CPSC to waste already scarce budgetary resources on procedures that do not serve a consumer protection or product safety goal. Public Citizen supports the goals of the proposed rule to update the regulation that interprets 6B. Public Citizen is acutely aware of the CPSC's enormous jurisdictional obligations and the challenges it posed by disproportionately modest resources. Despite this, we believe if the Commission proceeds with its mandate to prioritize consumer safety above all else, including the interest of business and industry, that the CPSC can fulfill its decree to advance product safety and protect the lives and health of Americans. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gregg. Ms. Kern.
Thank you. Acting Chairman Burkle, Commissioners, thank you for holding today's hearing and for providing this forum for constructive dialogue. On behalf of the American Apparel and Footwear Association, I appreciate the opportunity to testify today regarding the Consumer Product Safety Commission's agenda and priorities for fiscal years 2018 and 2019. AAFA is the national trade association representing apparel, footwear, travel goods, and other sewn product companies and their suppliers, which compete in the global market. Representing more than 1,000 world-famous name brands, our membership includes 350 companies drawn from throughout the supply chain. We are proud of the open and collaborative relationship that we share with the Commission. Product safety is a top priority for AAFA. As such, AAFA supports the Commission's priorities of focusing on risk, import surveillance, outreach and education, data-driven analysis. With many of our members engaged in the production and sale of children's clothing and footwear, we are on the front lines of product safety. It is our members who design and execute the quality and compliance programs that stitch product safety into every garment and shoe we make. To support our members in this effort, AAFA has taken the lead in educating our industry on this development, interpretation, implementation of product safety standards and regulations. It's because of these efforts, the priority that we place on product safety, and the relationship that we maintain with the Commission, that we are grateful for the opportunity to share our suggestions for the Commission's agenda and priorities for the next 2 years. The 3 priorities that we hope the Commission will adopt are as follows. Firstly, we're currently working with the Commission to review the testing burdens associated with testing of spandex to meet requirements of the Flammable Fabrics Act. This act exempted fabrics, regardless of weight, made entirely from or a combination of 6 types of fibers. The exemption, however, did not include spandex, even though spandex blend garments consistently pass flammability tests. Currently, the addition of spandex to a garment, even if it only makes up 1% of the blend, mandates a test of that garment that would otherwise not have been tested. Yet the tests after tests show that spandex is not flammable, either by itself or in combination with these other fibers. AAFA compiled test results from spandex flammability tests and provided these findings to the Commission to discuss exempting spandex from current testing standards. We appreciate the Commission's willingness to work together on reviewing the addition of spandex to the exempted fibers list. Secondly, we need to make sure that individual states and other countries have a common and consistent approach to product safety. This is not currently the case. The proliferation of conflicting and contradictory product safety standards among the states and abroad is quite likely the biggest product safety challenge of our time. We believe that the Commission has tools through which it can foster a more unified national and international approach to product safety. We would hope that the Commission can focus some of its resources on this priority issue. Finally, we would like to stress the importance of the Commission using AAFA as well as other associations as a resource when developing not only standards but guidance documents and educational events. We believe that it is integral to our mission to help educate the industry on its domestic and international product safety compliance obligations. AAFA and its members truly appreciate the opportunity to work with the Commission, and we look forward to continuing that relationship over the next 2 years and beyond. In conclusion, we're delighted to have a positive relationship with the Commission, and we believe that there are many opportunities for further collaboration. We look forward to working with the Commission to reduce testing and regulatory burdens, harmonize the product safety standard approach between states and abroad, and to build collaboration between the industry and the Commission for the benefit of consumer product safety and public health. I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Moore?
Thank you, Acting Chairman Burkle and Commissioners, for holding this hearing today and for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Toy Association. We appreciate CPSC's continued engagement and outreach to the regulated community and thank the Commission for soliciting input from interested stakeholders. By way of background, the Toy Association represents 1,000 businesses, including toy manufacturers, importers, and retailers, as well as toy inventors, designers, and testing labs who are all involved in bringing safe and fun toys and games for children to the market. Toy safety is the top priority for the industry, and our members have long been leaders in toy safety. One of our main priorities for the agency would be to develop final rules exempting materials from third-party testing requirements. Toy testing is a critical component of product safety assurance. However, toy companies, and more specifically small toy companies, still struggle with crippling costs associated with unnecessary and redundant third-party tests. The agency issued an NPR last year exempting several plastics from phthalate testing, and we are hopeful CPSC will issue the final rule very soon. These exemptions would dramatically decrease the cost of testing without compromising safety. Thanks to additional funding from Congress, the agency commissioned several studies recently on the presence of phthalates and additional plastic materials, manufactured wood and textiles, as well as the presence of heavy metals in manufactured wood and textiles. Based on the positive results of these studies, along with the data the toy industry has previously submitted, we strongly urge CPSC to move quickly to develop rules exempting testing of materials demonstrated to be highly likely to comply with CPSIA mandated limits. We were also pleased to see the agency issue a request for information seeking ways to reduce all regulatory burdens, and we will be submitting further items for consideration in response to that request. Another area where resources should continue to be focused is on import surveillance. CPSC has done a tremendous job in capturing violative products at the ports of entry before they make their way into the hands of consumers. We urge continued improvement in the implementation of the risk assessment methodology to more accurately target violative products at the ports of entry while allowing compliant goods to flow unimpeded. We also urge improvement at the time it takes to reach a conclusion regarding compliance after a product is detained for examination, ideally less than 5 calendar days. Our members still struggle with shipments being stopped and detained repeatedly, often for extended periods of time, and then ultimately released without any finding of fault, or in some cases without any examination taking place at all. Because toys are highly regulated and mostly imported under single HTS classification, they are targeted more frequently than many other products regulated by CPSC. Detention and examination costs, unhappy customers, missed sales opportunities, and canceled orders are just some of the issues our members have reported. One suggestion we have previously raised with agency staff is to allow importers to sample detained shipments for testing at a CPSC-approved private laboratory, similar to the process currently allowed by other regulators. For example, FDA allows importers of some goods to have detained products tested at a private laboratory to obtain a quicker result. We would also like to thank CPSC for increasing communication between the inspectors and the importers. When products are detained by CPSC officials, maintaining open communication is paramount, as companies first want to know why the product was stopped, and then is there a problem that they can address. For Toy Association members, safety consideration happens well before the product is imported, and they would like to be able to provide whatever information is necessary to facilitate the examination process. We hope to see this communication maintained and even improved upon going forward. As CPSC continues to increase communications with importers, we hope that the ongoing dialogue lowers the importer's risk profile and builds a basis for a trusted trader-like program, a trusted trader light, if you will, which would reduce the number of inspection and importer faces. However, any such program should be accessible to both large and small companies. As the agency is well aware, joining the CBP Trusted Trader Program or even the CTPAT program is very costly, time-consuming, and out of reach for many companies, especially small businesses. We envision those participating in the Trusted Trader Light program would be companies willing to go through some extra safety checks to enable an easier entry process. employing a trusted trader light program could decrease the workload for CPSC while at the same time increasing the hit rate for identifying violative products. We were pleased to learn the e-filing pilot program was a success. As CPSC considers moving to a beta pilot program, we would ask that the agency focus on collecting information critical to finding dangerous products. As the agency ramps up its participation in the ACE single window program, it is important to consider the amount of time estimated by agency staff to submit the necessary information. According to the April 2017 report issued on the Alpha pilot, it took participants 10 hours to retrieve all the necessary information, then another 10 to 15 hours per product to manually enter it into the system. This is not an insignificant period of time. As the agency considers moving forward and determining what certificate information must be submitted, it must bear in mind that the amount of time a company will need to dedicate to this effort would be extremely costly, with very little, if any, safety benefit seen by the consumer. Certifications for toys and other regulated products are required by CPSIA. However, to the best of our knowledge, the current system of providing a certificate within 24 hours of a request has worked well and with much less burden on the regulated community. Intellectual property infringement has become an increasingly significant issue for the toy industry, due in part to the increased e-commerce prevalence. IP infringing toys are extremely concerning on a number of levels, including the potential ramifications for children's safety. Not only is a brand compromised and IP stolen, but it is also likely that that toy has not undergone the rigorous safety testing and certification required to be sold in the U.S. We urge the agency to continue its diligence, working even more closely with other government agencies to help combat these fake goods. Further scrutiny of e-commerce platforms and one-off shipments of products coming in unchecked at the ports through either courier services or the mail should be a budget priority for CPSC in the coming years. The supply chain has become increasingly complex, and thus the impact of regulations has become more difficult to predict. For example, in recent years, CPSC has issued certain draft rulemakings prior to soliciting stakeholder input, and industry has universally pushed back, concerned about the significant cost those proposed rules could have on their business operations. We therefore recommend CPSC reach out to stakeholders prior to issuing draft rulemakings, often like the stakeholder meeting that happened yesterday, so that regulators can be more fully informed of how these regulations may impact business processes. Such meetings would have been helpful prior to the issuance of the 1110 rule, the third-party testing regulations, and proposed voluntary recall rule. This is a process frequently used by other government agencies such as the FAA and the EPA and should be emulated by CPSC. CPSC has made many strides recently to increase consumer awareness of safety programs and initiatives, often partnering with stakeholders to increase the effectiveness of such campaigns. Specifically, the Pool Safely and Anchor It campaigns have garnered the attention of consumers across the country. CPSC should continue to look for opportunities and appropriate partners to help improve consumer awareness on current and emerging product safety issues of importance. With the agency's limited budget, this can make better use of limited resources in amplifying a message and its outreach and further advance the agency's mission of protecting consumers. In recent years, there may have been some reluctance to engage with industry and some stakeholders on such programs, but we urge the agency to continue pursuing meaningful programs to inform and educate the public on issues of consumer safety and utilize all tools and potential partners at their disposal. For example, we see a need for increased consumer education on the importance of following the age grade labeling on toys. As the agency well knows, age appropriateness is a key factor in ensuring safe play, especially when it comes to children, and with new parents and grandparents joining the marketplace every day. We would urge CPSC to reach out not only to the Toy Association, but to other industry groups to work together on educational campaigns. Toy safety is the top priority for the toy industry, and we are supportive of CPSC efforts to keep consumers safe from the unreasonable risk of injury and death associated with consumer products. We appreciate this opportunity to provide feedback to the agency, and we wish to be a continued resource for Commission and Commission staff. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to our 5-minute rounds for each of the commission questions, and I'll begin that round of questioning. Ms. McGuigan, I apologize for having to cut you off, but I don't know if there is anything left that you would like to say or points you'd like to make.
Clearly, I talked much faster this morning when I timed myself and made it under the 10 minutes. I didn't talk quite fast enough. My comment was really actually going to echo what Autumn indicated about developing a trusted trader program for importers. There is, in effect, what was supposed to be a trusted trader program, importer self-assessment, product safety, which is a joint CPSC program. That program has really not seen its full potential because participants, it hasn't been demonstrated to importers that there really is a benefit to that program, and as Autumn indicated, it also has been really limited to those that are current participants in CBP's ISA program. We think that by developing a program where importers are willing to open up their product safety compliance programs to review by the CPSC, that an opportunity for input and improvement, that the CPSC can move its attention to away from low-risk importers to really high-risk importers, and that's really where you're going to get the defective and non-compliant product. I think the one point that I wanted to make is that I've heard some concern that the agency wants to wait until CBP implements and does its review for its trusted trader program, and I would really urge the CPSC to move forward now. There really is no reason to wait. There's already interagency risk assessment methodology that has been looked at, and any program that the CPSC does implement can be then slotted into CBP government-wide trusted trader program when CBP finally implements its new review.
Thank you. And my concern always with the trusted trader program is it would disparately affect the small businesses due to the cost of it. But what you're talking about, the trusted trader light program, that seems, and maybe we can talk about that further and have additional discussions about that, because the small businesses, obviously it would benefit them as well, probably more so. And so to take that into account would be good. I also wanted to welcome Mr. Gregg. I think this is your first priorities hearing and your maiden voyage, so welcome and thank you for being here. Another point I wanted to make earlier, I think I misspoke. I talked about our commitment to 104s and maintaining our statutory responsibilities, and one of my colleagues pointed out it's not 2 104s every month, it's 2 104s every 6 months. So Patty Politzer, I see you. She's very happy to hear that. So anyway, and one other point that I wanted to make was also that it was raised in the first panel with regards to batteries and lithium-ion batteries, and in the second panel it was raised with regards to hoverboards. And I wanted to just make it clear that the commission as a whole, both the commissioners as well as our staff, have really made lithium-ion batteries a priority for this agency, realizing the implications that it has on safety and the issues that we've seen thus far. So the agency is concentrating on it and spending time and resources towards that end to see what we can find out to promote safety. We're also involved in intergovernmental discussions because, as was pointed out in both panels, there's opportunities for us to work with other agencies so we're not each working in a silo. I wanted to ask Ms. McGuigan, with regards to the Internet of Technology, have you thought about where this agency could start? Obviously, it is a concern. I spoke to the American Bar Association on the topic with other governmental agencies in terms of this is just, it really is coming to pass and coming quickly. Do you have any thoughts about where we could begin to address that issue?
There currently is an interagency working group that I know is addressing this. I think part of it is, dedicating the staff and resources to be able to do this, to understand that that's a priority for the agency. There are opportunities to engage with the interagency workforce. I think yesterday's example of the recall effectiveness workshop was a terrific example and model that could be replicated to gather in all stakeholders, including privacy advocates, cybersecurity experts, and I would imagine that it wouldn't be just a one-day event. It could be a series of them where you have particular topics that you're addressing to gain the information to help you develop a risk-based approach to these products.
Thank you very much. My time has expired. Commissioner Adler?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And Ms. Kern, unless I'm mistaken, this is also your maiden voyage before the Commission, and welcome to you as well. So as I was sitting here reflecting on the testimony this morning, one of the things that struck me as I listened to Ms. McGuigan and Ms. Kern and Ms. Moore is that you represent groups that are terrific in terms of enlightened, progressive leadership. You speak fiercely on behalf of your members. You're very quick to point out when you think we commit errors, but you have always worked cooperatively with us, and we can't thank you enough for that. And I also wanted to include Chuck Samuels in that statement because AHAM has been a terrific group to work with. So, Ms. McGuigan, the first thing I wanted to talk about is this notion of an advisory committee, and you take me back to days of old, and probably I'm the only one who remembers them, but actually in the early days of the Commission we had 3 advisory committees, one of which was a Product Safety Advisory Committee. And when we got to 1981, one of the things the Commission said is you're robbing us of resources, and maintaining an advisory committee is actually a very expensive thing to do. So I'm just wondering, what should we sacrifice in order to set up an advisory committee, first of all? And secondly, could you clarify, are you talking about an advisory committee that would be constituted solely with industry stakeholders? Would it be a mixed bag including consumer representatives?
The latter. You have heard from various commenters over the last couple of years arguments pushing for a federal advisory committee, and I think that has been in large part due to several proposed rules that were made that we believe were ill-advised, that were not, that there was no input sought. I mean, there really wasn't an understanding of global supply chains and how it would impact and really what was the best way to effectuate the results. So a federal advisory committee is not the only solution, but it is a solution that would institutionalize ongoing engagement. And I think that's why that you've heard this proposal several times. If there is a culture change where ongoing engagement is consistently sought from all stakeholders, not just industry, consumer advocates as well, I mean, I think you want to be as well informed and best advised, then probably the push for a FACA would go away. But that is one method to ensure that it is institutionalized into the agency's DNA.
I had a quick question for Ms. Kern. You raised the issue with respect to the flammability of spandex, and reading what you've said, it seems to be an important point. And I guess my question is, you've shared this data with the staff. Is it the case that the staff has come back and said, we don't agree with you, or is it the case the staff is working on it, but they said, and this is reminiscent of the point I was just making, we just don't have the resources to bring this to the Commission immediately because we're a tiny agency struggling to pay our way?
Thank you, Commissioner. So this is very much an ongoing process for us. We've received some data back from our labs to indicate what they've seen in their testing. So this is an ongoing process. We have not received a decision back from you all, so we look forward to continuing that process with you.
And then finally, Ms. Weintraub, I did ask Dr. Hoffman if they had any position on the executive order, and my understanding is that CFA actually does have a position on what they informally refer to as PAYGO. Do you have a position? Would you mind sharing that?
We do have an official position on the 2 out, 1 in. Been trying to find the right metaphor for many months now. We oppose it vigorously. We think it is irrational. We think it is bad policy across the board. Regulations, especially from this agency, are infrequent. There are not many mandatory standards that the CPSC has promulgated since the CPSC was created. Every single regulation takes years, some longer than others. Extensive resources and extensive need is documented for these rules. And to be required to get rid of two to move one forward is beyond one based in logic or evidence. And we would certainly never, ever want a particular segment of the population to suffer increased risk as a result of protecting another population, and that is not how our regulatory system has worked in the past, nor do we think how it should work in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Adler. Commissioner Robinson.
Ms. McGuigan, on this Federal Advisory Committee, when I first joined the agency 4 years ago, I had some great idea on getting audience participation or stakeholder participation that I thought was original to me. I've found that most of my ideas were not original that I've come up with in the last 4 years. But when I really examined what we as an agency would have to do in terms of meeting the Federal Advisory Committee Act, it was just really, we just didn't have the resources. But I did, back in those days, although I got no response, encourage industry on particular issues to get together a group without our involvement, because it could provide an excellent dialogue with us if industry could get together and hammer out what their position is and why on particular issues. So I just throw that out to you, that you don't have the constraints that we have, and I know that we would welcome such a thing. I want to ask a couple of questions on data of you, Ms. McGuigan and Ms. Weintraub. Since the last priorities hearing, I know Chairman Burkle is very, very interested in figuring out how we can expand our data capabilities, and my office has been very focused on this for years now. But we've become aware since the last priorities hearing a vast array of data sets that already exist that we hope and believe may already have product injury incident data in them. And just for a moment, setting aside what we had in the retail reporting program, has your group, Ms. McGuigan, done anything to try to find those data sets to see what, if anything, we could do with them? And I guess just because you may answer this any way you want, Ms. Weintraub, you last priorities hearing, as I recall, were sort of focused on could we get the incident data matched up with some socioeconomic information so that we could better provide education, if nothing, and outreach. So I don't know if either of you have been successful in finding data sets that are out there that might be helpful to us.
Well, the issue of low-income child safety is one that we continue to prioritize. It was in my written testimony this year as well. One suggestion that we have is figuring out whether the NICE system could include a proxy that would protect patient privacy, but would give an indication of the socioeconomic status of the consumer. We think due to the very positive interaction and one of the rare pieces of collaboration where hospitals can obtain this information, and we know it's relied upon by CDC and others, that system, the NICE system, could be the place where that data is collected. We've not been successful in making that happen yet, but we very much think it should, and we think being able to understand socioeconomic status, understanding how different communities obtain information, how different communities may suffer disproportionate risks than others, could overall enhance injury prevention efforts across the board.
Our members have been focused more on enhancing the data that they individually collect. So their consumer data, rather than looking for outside
Okay.
data sets.
Let me just throw out there that Heather Bramble and I just got back from a trip to Israel where we visited some different organizations doing very interesting thing. And there's a group there, B'Terem, that's sort of taken our NICE data, the way we gather it, and kicked it up a notch. And while it's a micro, because Israel only has 24 hospitals and they have 11 participants in the program, they've done some amazing things in terms of educating medical professionals who work with families where there's been an injury because they found there was a repeat incident rate that was pretty high with both the child that was injured and within the family, and their numbers are just really, really impressive. So I don't know, maybe we can kick off a pilot program. I'm a micro person, so maybe we could figure out how we could work with that. Mr. Gregg, I thank you so much for some of your wonderful ideas on how we could promote saferproducts.gov. I'm running out of time, so I just want to say that, again, on the micro level, you have given us some great ideas on how we could increase the visibility, but I would encourage you, even with your members, I think you said you have 400,000 members, to get them to report to us when they know of product injury data. We start with, whatever group we have in front of us. So I would just strongly encourage you to do that. Hopefully we'll have another round. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Robinson. Commissioner Kay.
Thank you, Acting Chair, and thank you to the panelists. Ms. McGuigan, in your written testimony, I don't think you referred to it in your oral testimony, but in your written testimony you referred to egregious, this is your quote, egregious and willful violators that we should be focusing on in the civil penalty context that we're not. Can you give me some more specifics about who those willful and egregious and willful violators are?
Well, clearly I don't know who they are because you haven't moved forward with the penalty case. What our concern was that there has been, over the past several years, a focus on the amount of the penalty, and the vast majority of the penalties, not in all situations, but certainly many of the penalties have been on failure to timely report, and in some instances there is a belief within the regulated community that that is the CPSC second guessing and taking a look at data that the product safety professionals within an entity is really looking at. It's really not going after those that are deliberately and willfully bringing in products that don't comply, intentionally not complying. That's what those comments were directed to.
So do you have examples, though, of people that you believe are willfully and egregiously violating the law?
As I indicated before, I would not have that because you have not moved forward with a penalty case. That is the point, is that if you focus your investigative resources not just on those that can pay big penalties, but focus them on potentially high-risk importers, do enhanced data mining of your saferproducts.gov, that you're able to determine and identify willful and egregious violators.
I see. And you mentioned data mining, and you mentioned it in your oral statement, and I think if I got it right, you said that there were recent developments in data analytics that we should be employing that we're not. Is that what you said?
I did.
And what are those? And I ask, and what do you mean by recent? Because the agency staff has been looking at this for a long time. We have very sophisticated data analytics, I believe, and very qualified personnel in our epidemiology division. I'm wondering what they're missing that you're aware of.
Well, I can tell you that our trade association in and of itself is doing a whole push on innovation, and we have had IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, other groups come in and talk to us about the use of artificial intelligence, the use of predictive analytics. There was a panel even at the regional ICVSO where some engineer students got up there and were using analytic data on publicly available consumer reviews, able to identify consumer products. I'm not aware that the CPSC is doing that. If they are, it would be useful to let the public know that they're doing that. If they aren't doing that, then I think the CPSC should explore some of those options.
I'm pretty sure, by the way, in the same groups that you've seen have come and pitched their products to our staff as well over the last few years.
Well, it may be helpful to, I mean, we've talked about this internally within our members, it may be helpful to do so that you have a pilot of real data. And one of the potential options is to look at old retail reporting data, use these tools on that data, and then see what comes out from that. I mean, you would actually determine whether or not these tools are helpful to you or not.
Yeah, and to Commissioner Robinson's point, I think that that's something that RELA could actually organize. You can ask your members for that data, and you can run that pilot and give that to us. And I'm just going to tell you right now, we just don't have the resources for it. You mentioned earlier about the FACA, which obviously has gotten exhaustive coverage so far, is a very popular idea amongst my colleagues and me. The examples that you and Ms. Moore cited were 3 rulemakings that were initiated at least 3 chairmen ago, and to put it in more probably meaningful terms, 4 iPhones ago. And so I'm wondering, you talked about culture change, and perhaps there is a lack of a recognition of culture change. Do you have more recent examples where you feel like the existence of a FACA in our current day activities would be making a difference?
I think there's a couple issues that we can talk about. I mean, I think the recall effectiveness workshop was a terrific example. I mean, you announced that over a year and a half ago, so it took a long time for the agency to actually move forward. In the meantime, the regulated public had no idea where that stood. So if you had a FACA, there would be a structure and format. Again, I'm not wedded to that particular format. It's a push or a plea, really, to get enhanced engagement and ongoing engagement with all stakeholders. Again, yesterday's conversation, I thought, was terrific.
Thank you, Commissioner Kay. Commissioner Mohorovic.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, panelists, collectively for your contributions. Ms. Weintraub, I want to thank you and congratulate you for highlighting the crisis, as you put it, the crisis which is ATV and ROV use on roads, and highlighting the fact and pointing out a statistic that 65% of the fatalities of ATVs and ROVs, ATV use occurred on roads, and the extremely high percentage of those roads, which are paved roads, et cetera. I have failed, I think, in every attempt to discourage states from opening up roads for ATV and lawful ROV use, especially in New Mexico, where I failed to encourage the sponsor to withdraw his legislation, failed to encourage representatives and senators to vote against it, and failed to encourage Governor Martinez to veto the legislation. So I am clearly not the vehicle for change here to address the crisis as we see more and more states are opening up their laws for maybe in some situations limited use, but I think more use than anybody who understands the hazard would be comfortable with. If you could touch on 2 points, because it directly relates to me with on-road use. Conspicuity as an issue, to me, troubles me in a sense that I wonder whether or not that's going to encourage more use on roads if people see that the fact that the product has these kind of elements that we might mandate that would encourage them to use it on roads, and then also generally what you think the agency should do to discourage use of ATVs and ROVs on roads and especially paved roads.
Well, first I want to thank you for your efforts as a consumer advocate. I am very experienced with not achieving goals right away. So it takes a long time, and your efforts were excellent and will make a difference. We just define things over longer periods of time. I appreciate the question. Even this past March, we saw an increase in local entities considering on-road ordinances. We sent letters to 13 entities that month. Usually it's about 3. And there's definitely an increased interest, especially when states pass laws allowing local entities to increase on-road access. In terms of being conspicuous, I want to interpret this in a number of different ways. First, I think it's not clear to consumers when, if they are cognizant of this at all, when and where they could safely and legally operate ATVs on roads when it is so variable, even within one state. It could vary by county. It could vary by some other definition of municipal lines, and it's very confusing for someone who wants to comply with the law. Further, it's very confusing when there is a label on the vehicle itself which says, you know, do not operate on roads. What does that mean? Obviously, it entirely undermines the warning if consumers are aware of the many warnings on the ATVs at all, which is another issue that we would love the agency to study in the rulemaking. So the issue of being clear and conspicuous to consumers is very significant. In terms of making OHVs better able to operate on roads by design, yes, that's very disconcerting, undermines all of those messages. And generally, we need a lot of help here. We need people in particular states. We need people at all levels of government to have a very clear message, also working with industry, which some industry documents indicate widespread, clear opposition to operation on roads, and yet there are industry groups in local who are vociferous in supporting increased access, so it's confusing in terms of where folks are. So we need to speak in a unified, loud, clear voice again and again about how problematic this is and the great risk that it poses to consumers.
Anything specifically with the agency that you think we could do potentially collectively to discourage your...
Yes, I think the CPSC can be clearer in terms of
messaging.
I think making clear that roads mean paved and unpaved, reiterating the message. I've seen a lot of really creative tweets, great images, with dinosaurs and others. I've really noted that creativity. I'm retweeting them, I'm reposting them, but we need to do a lot more. We need to make sure that this message gets out there from the beginning when people decide to purchase these vehicles, from the very beginning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are going to have a second round of questions. We all feel that would be helpful to all of us, so I will begin that second round. One of the things I wanted to talk about, because it was brought up in the previous panel as well as here, and that is this property infringement and the property rights infringement and these counterfeit goods that are coming into the country. So our agency, we'd like to be more proactive, and that's a good argument for the retailer reporting program, catching those issues up sooner and earlier. But with regards to this issue of patent infringements and counterfeit goods, I would just ask all of your help in terms of, now you heard AHAM this morning identify a counterfeit issue that they are having, but as your members see or identify these issues, whether it's toys or in the retail in your space, that you would call those to our attention, because then that can direct us and staff can presumably or hopefully be directed in a direction. I think the challenge we all face now is the internet and all that is going on there. And to your point, I think there's so much going on under the radar that we can't get to because they aren't the folks who are sitting here at the table this morning. They're not the consumer groups who are paying attention here. It's those who are in the shadows, and that's the challenge for us, is to find those products because they're on a number of occasions more dangerous than what's out in the marketplace. So any assistance you can provide us as your members identify these issues, come to us with the specifics, that would be very helpful. And I would say that on all of the testimony in both panels, there's referrals or comments about situations. But for us to know the specifics is very, very helpful. It's the way we can address the issue. So whether it's, looking back at Kids in Danger and Nancy, as you identify these problems, or Dr. Hoffman talked about a lot of products out there that aren't being regulated, as you get as you identify these, or your members identify these products, to come to us with the specifics, because then that can point us in a direction, because we're doing the best we can, but as you've heard across the dais this morning and across your table as well, our resources are limited, our staff is limited, and so any help we can have in identifying these issues would be greatly appreciated. So that's all I have. Commissioner Adler?
Thank you very much, and I just wanted to say, Commissioner Mohorovic, that I think you sell yourself short in the work you've done on ATVs on roads. I think what you've done has been exceptional. That's stuff I've tried to join you in doing, and yes, we have been unsuccessful so far, but the point I've noticed is you don't give up. And so I think your efforts will continue, and I hope to continue working with you in that respect. So very quick question, Ms. Moore. I noticed that you raised the issue when toys are stopped at the ports, the idea of allowing importers to sample detained shipments for testing at a CPSC-approved lab. That's something I assume you've shared with the Commission, and I'm curious, have you gotten a staff reaction? It seems like a good idea to me in the abstract, but I haven't talked to staff about it. But is this something where staff has come back to you and said, we don't agree with you, or is this another one of those, the idea has been passed to us and we're mulling it over?
I believe it's the latter.
Okay, well, thank you, because as with so many of these things, at least in the abstract, without hearing any other ideas, it sounds like a good idea to me. So, Ms. McGuigan, I did want to ask you, on page 2 of your testimony, you raised the specter, actually it was on page 4 and on page 2, of the Commission reviewing those unnecessary, ineffective, and overly burdensome regulations. And I would never argue that all of our regulations are the opposite of that and efficient and effective always, but I do think we have a fairly good review of regulations, and I'm not asking you to give me a list right now, but if you have specific regulations in mind, I think we would greatly appreciate it if you would share your notions about those and the underlying support and documentation.
Absolutely. So we do intend to comment on the notice.
Okay.
We do intend to submit comments. We've actually been busy surveying our members for this and yesterday, so now we will turn to that.
Yeah, and that's something we would, at least I would really appreciate, and I suspect everybody here would.
It's our intention to provide
comments.
comments.
Thank you for that. Mr. Gregg, again, welcome to you, and thank you for your testimony. I just wanted, again, to reflect on saferproducts.gov, because I've been at the Commission, I think it's going on 9 years now, and I cannot remember a more contentious meeting that we've ever had than when we were considering saferproducts.gov. As I recall, we ran through something on the order of 21 proposed amendments that, in my view, would have crippled and weakened saferproducts.gov. And what's fascinating now is that a lot of the criticism seems to have gone away. There were concerns that trial lawyers would send floods of claimants to the saferproducts.gov, that people would salt, I think was the term, frivolous complaints that would jack up the number of complaints that would give people leverage in product liability litigation and so on. I think none of that has occurred. And so what's interesting is to hear very little pushback from the people who are objecting to it, but now to hear consumer groups in particular saying, okay, it's working, it's successful, expand it. And I completely agree with you that that is something that we need to spend more time and attention on. That's just a comment in passing. And Ms. Kern, I just wanted to, again, make a quick comment about harmonization, because I see that your industry views it as a huge challenge. I think we view it as a challenge, but this is, again, back to the notion of resources. As a commissioner, if somebody said to me, can you write a new safety standard, or can you take your safety standard and harmonize it with somebody else's, I think the answer is usually we're going to try to do something to expand protection for consumers. And what I have found, and I'm curious if you have a reaction, is that most importers, most manufacturers, when they're faced with conflicting international standards or conflicting state standards, they just say, what's the most stringent? Let's produce to that. And there's some record keeping that's annoying, but basically in terms of production or having separate inventories, that really isn't occurring as much as one might think. Do you have any reaction to that or any additional evidence to give us?
Kind of conforming to the strictest standard, we do in certain cases advise members, as that is typically what makes the most sense, to be able to produce a product that can be sold across different markets. So that's advice that we pass along as well, but we do appreciate just kind of the mindset of approaching product safety in a similar fashion between states and abroad, so that that priority can remain as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Robinson.
Thank you. Ms. McGuigan, I am going to put you on the spot here a little bit. Many retailers and RELA members are now, with their online presence, are providing a third-party platform. And because when our statute was written, that wasn't even something that was a concept, let alone a reality. And it's becoming more and more ubiquitous. And there really is nothing mentioned in our statute about an obligation for third-party platform providers to do the 15B reports that other people have. And I'm wondering if you think there's any chance that RELA would work with the CPSC on a pilot program to try to get third-party platform providers to report to us.
That's a good question. We only have one member, maybe two, that I'm aware of that is offering a platform. So obviously I would have to consult with those particular members. I think there is a challenge because the communication goes directly to the online seller. So the platform provider often, most frequently, doesn't get that information, at least that I'm aware of. So I probably would need to learn a little bit more about the mechanics of how that works, which frankly, I'm sorry, I just don't know.
No, that's okay. But let's talk about it further, because I know for liability purposes, there's some distance built in there as well. But I really would like to get my arms around this one. I just don't think we're going to get anything through this Congress to take this into account. Ms. Weintraub, I'm very interested in what you think about the metrics that are being used with respect to laundry pod incidents under this new standard.
I think we need to do a much better job of getting those metrics out there and getting data out there in a quicker, more transparent way. We've been very concerned and share the concerns of AAP and others about the idea of coming up with a rate based on sale figures alone is problematic. It's not how you measure public health. And in the standard itself, that is not the sole measure. We worked hard to make sure that that, in fact, was not the sole measure, because obviously when you look at public health issues, the problem exists in and of itself, and you need to look at the incidence.
But do you agree that with Dr. Hoffman's comments about what denominator should be used in making this analysis?
I do.
Okay.
I do. But I also think that looking at the straight numbers itself is also very important. And there is some data out there. There's a lot more that has not yet been finalized. But looking at the straight numbers itself, we want to make sure that those numbers decrease and that fewer people across the board suffer as a result of these types of.
Okay. I'm sure you're aware of the fact that the ATV voluntary standards right on the cusp, I don't think they're there yet, of including brake lights and reflectors on ATVs. Do you think there's anything about including brake lights and reflectors that is going to, in and of itself, encourage drivers to drive on the road?
You know, this is a complicated issue because, as I discussed with Commissioner Mohorovic, we don't want to increase any sort of idea that operating on a road is safe. On the other hand, reflectors could be and
Prevent
brake lights could
accidents.
prevent accidents across the board.
Right.
So it's finding that right balance, which is a real challenge and very significant. And overall, we do support safety improvements if there's data showing a need for them, and obviously encourage, a lack and a complete prohibition of operating on roads.
Ms. Moore, I'm running out of time, but let me ask you quickly. You talked about having more stakeholder involvement in your written presentation. What do you think we can change? I mean, to be honest with you, I thought we had a huge amount of stakeholder involvement in this agency, but I'm interested in what you think needs to be changed about our meetings policy to have the stakeholder involvement that you seem to think is lacking.
Sure. I think there have been times, and Commissioner Kay brought up the fact that some of these rules that I referenced were several chairmen ago, and that's also true. But the rule that we go back and use as an example is the 1110 rule, and there was universal pushback from industry that it was just unworkable. And the agency recognized that, pulled back, had some more internal meetings within the COAC to talk about the supply chain so the agency could really understand the full supply chain. I think meetings like that are really important.
Okay, I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. McGuigan, just picking up where we left off in terms of the idea of this type of consultation, and I appreciate you conceding that you're not wedded to a FACA, that you have a greater goal in mind. What is your vision of how open and transparent that process would be? Because you mentioned having all stakeholders involved.
Well, again, I'll refer to yesterday. I thought yesterday was a great example. You had consumer advocates, you had trade associations representing a wide range of manufacturers, retailers, labs. You had NGOs. So you had a diverse opinion, all of which are with a shared common goal of enhancing the effectiveness of recalls and making sure that defective products are withdrawn quickly.
One of the things about yesterday that I think we fell a little bit short was that it wasn't as open as I think it could have been because we did not webcast it, we did not record it, and we're not posting that on the web. I don't know if you're aware of that. I realize there are technological challenges associated with that and the way the room was broken up, but I think we could have done that. Do you support, as part of what you're talking about, even as we do even more work on recall effectiveness, having those things webcast, having them recorded so others can look back at the sessions and see them who may not have been able to come and participate?
I actually thought they were being recorded, so clearly I misunderstood. I do think that there is an opportunity. There is something to be said of the small groups that there was really open and frank conversation. That when something is webcast and is recorded, there tends to be an inhibiting factor there. So maybe a balance between the two, where you might have parts of it. Again, I'm not wedded to a particular format. I'm just wedded to the idea of having enhanced engagement.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on it, and Commissioner Burkle mentioned it in terms of the trusted trader about the unintended consequences and who's left out. And there was a subset of the CPSC world, or maybe most of the CPSC world, that can afford to fly in for these things, that they can hire somebody or they can pay attention to the Federal Register notice. And then there's a lot of people that are impacted by what we do that aren't able to do that, and they can only watch it on the webcast or only hear about it and watch recordings. So I think it's a discussion that's worth continuing to have, and I hope you'll support, as we strike that balance, making sure that it is a broad cross-section and it's not just sort of the favorite children who get to come and sit in the room for that.
I absolutely understand your point.
And by the way, just as an aside on Trusted Trader, I think it might be worth follow-up conversations for you with Customs, because the conversations that I've had with CBP at the highest career levels are, and this is in my prior capacity, was that they definitely wanted us to wait on a Trusted Trader program because they felt like it was going to interfere with their ability to do some type of consistent government-wide program. And so that was part of the reason, actually, why we did back off. After Commissioner Mohorovic had gotten it into the operating plan, we started on it. I talked to Customs at the highest career levels, and I think that's important, that distinction between the highest career levels versus the highest political levels. And Kevin's still there. So and he's the acting, I think, still. And unless something has changed, that was their view at the time. So it might be worth follow-up conversations. And thank you, by the way, for your continued engagement. I know it's not always easy for you, but it's definitely valuable for us. Ms. Kern, on the subject of the spandex testing exemption, there might be a disconnect between what you all believe you've submitted and what staff thinks it needs, because after I read your written testimony, I went to staff and I talked to them about it, and I think they might need more data. So if you're waiting on the staff to act before if something happens, you might want to connect with them or have somebody at AFA connect with them. And the suggestion that they had was look at the amount of data that was requested during the 80s whenever the original exemptions were created. That's the model that they use. That's the robustness of data that they would like to see, and I'm not sure they have that yet. So just want to point that out. And then, Ms. Moore, I wanted to thank you for the statement that was put out by the Toy Industry Association about fidget spinners. I think they're definitely toys, and so I appreciate that. And Ms. Weintraub, just in my remaining time, one, what do you think about fidget spinners, toys, not toys, and how do you feel like the agency has been aggressive enough in protecting the public on this issue?
So full disclosure, I have 3 children, many fidget spinners among them. I think they are toys. I see how they interact with them. My home is not a laboratory, but I can see how they interact with them. My children are all older than 8 years old, but I see how children play with them, and they do play, and I think they need to be considered toys. They need to be age graded. I also see how they drop them all the time. It's marking my floors. It's annoying when we are walking. But you see, I mean, I was in the grocery store with my daughter, and the piece fell out. So we see the choking hazard emerge, and it's very important that consumers have that information. If it is age graded, if it is considered a toy, there will be a label on it that will inform consumers about the hazard. I think I have seen some good social media work from the agency in terms of educating consumers about the risk from fidget spinners, but I think there could be more. I think in the traditional realms of communication, there could be more clear statements coming from the agency about this, and I think that would be very helpful, because then I think other forms of media will pick it up and convey it. And I think this is one of those opportunities where the product, while thank goodness we're not seeing a large number of incidents, we are seeing great interest, and we don't want that number to bubble up, but I think this is an opportunity for media interest. So to get those messages out there in even more ways would be very helpful.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mohorovic?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I didn't have any questions, but now I do. On the subject of fidget spinners, and Ms. Moore and Ms. Weintraub, if you could continue with your thought on fidget spinners with regards to messaging from the agency. Do you believe that the agency should make a clear opinion, whether it's a general counsel's opinion, on what we determine these products to be? Because I think there's importers or domestic manufacturers that maybe don't know whether or not they have a testing obligation. Do they have a certification obligation as either a toy and or a children's product or a general use product? Do you think that kind of messaging should come out from the agency so regulated parties should understand clearly what their obligations are?
I do.
You do. Ms. Moore? And I'm sorry that Commissioner Kay referenced your statement on fidget spinners, and I have not read it. Could you just concisely maybe state the point of that statement?
Sure. Our position is we first educate the industry on what's required to sell a toy in the U.S., and then after that we advise parents to follow the age grading, labeling on a toy, look for the small parts warning, buy from a reputable retailer that you know and trust, check the product, make sure it's sturdy. So it was more tips for parents and consumers.
Ms. Moore, maybe I'm wrong. Was it a statement specific to fidget spinners?
It was.
Can you get to the part about fidget spinners as opposed to the other messaging?
Well,
do you consider them a toy?
We do consider them.
You do. Thank you. Okay. And I don't have any other questions. Without repeating any testimony that was provided orally, and do any of the panelists have something they'd like to get off their chest before we adjourn? No? Mr. Gregg? Very well. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Hearing no further questions, again, I want to thank all of you for being here, for taking the time, and Treasurer to be here to let us know your thoughts on what we should be making a priority over the next 2 years here at the agency. A couple mentions were made, more than a couple, regarding yesterday's workshop on recall effectiveness. I just want to publicly thank the staff of CPSC, because they really did the yeoman's work. They were the ones who carried this and who really made yesterday's workshop a success. At the end of the day, people were just as enthusiastic as they were in the beginning of the day. So my sincere thanks to staff for all of their hard work on that issue. And I also just want to reference another item that was raised. That's the RFI on burden reduction. The comment period ends September 30th. I would encourage all of you who have ideas. It's not specifically to any one way, whether it's elimination of a rule. It's any way that the agency could consider reducing the burdens on industry. So we look forward to seeing your comments on that as well. As a reminder, I mentioned this earlier today, seems like a long time ago, the record will be kept open for 1 week from today, so for any information you may want to add to your testimony, feel free to do that. I also want to acknowledge for the record that we did receive additional written comments from people who were not able to testify here today. PGMA, the Portable Generator Manufacturers Association, the International Sleep Products Association, Alexium Specialty Chemicals and Solutions, Stephen Esch, the Baby Carrier Industry Alliance, and the Outdoor Power Equipment Institute. I just want to assure you your testimony has been received and it is has been reviewed as well. Finally, I want to thank our Executive Director and her staff, the Office of Secretary, Office of Facilities, our General Counsel, and of course John McGugan from Communications for all of their efforts today to make this public hearing happen, and always happens so seamlessly. Thank you again to all of you for being here, and as I mentioned at the outset, the agency door is always open. You do not have to wait for this opportunity, but I would encourage all of our stakeholders to approach the agency and to let us know whether or not you have any thoughts, ideas. We love solutions, so any of those are welcome as well. Thank you all very much, and this concludes our hearing on priorities at the CPSC. Thank you.